Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. I will now call the Subdivision and Development Appeal Board hearing to order for January 2026 at 1:03 p.m. Jody.
Please note that today's hearing is being streamed live and recorded on YouTube. Attendees acknowledge that in accordance with Section 20 Sub 2 of the Access to Information Act and Section 4 Sub C of the Protection of Privacy Act, names, addresses, and other details provided when speaking at today's hearing will be publicly shared. Should you have any questions related to the collection or disclosure of personal information, please contact the Legislative and Advisory Services Division for the Town of High River by sending an email to atip@highriver.ca. That is ATIPP@highriver.ca.
Thank you, Jody. The first item today is the adoption of the agenda. Does any member have additions, deletions, or changes to the agenda? I see none and hear none. Can I have a motion that the Subdivision and Development Appeal Board adopt the agenda for January 30th, 2026 Subdivision and Development Appeal hearing as presented?
I'll give you that motion.
All right. All in favor? The motion is adopted. The next item is the adoption of minutes. The next item is the adoption of the minutes from the January 9th, 2026 Subdivision and Development Appeal Board hearing. Are there any errors or omissions? I see none. I'll ask for a motion that the Subdivision and Development Appeal Board adopt the minutes from the January 9th, 2026 Subdivision and Development Appeal Board hearing as presented.
I'll second that motion.
All right, the minutes are adopted. Now we will go on to the Chair, Board, and Clerk introductions. We will begin with the introductions. My name is Derek Zimmer, and I am the Chair for today's hearing. I'd like to ask the board members to introduce themselves, followed by our clerks.
And I'm Ruthann Koyama.
Renee Clements.
I just want to state that it was Ruthann Koyama because I'm not sure that the microphone picked you up.
Not on, yes.
Okay. Thank you. I am Jody Hipkin, acting as clerk, along with Alicia Paulette.
For the record, all questions and comments should be directed to me, the board chair. Objections to the board. Before we proceed, are there any objections to any board members or concerns about bias or conflict of interest? Please state your objections now. I hear none and see none. We will continue. Preliminary matters. Before we move into the summary of appeal, I'll ask if there's any preliminary matters that anyone wishes to raise. Again, I see and hear none. We will move to the summary of appeal.
Thank you. This is an appeal against the decision of the Development Authority to refuse a major development permit with variances for 605 McLeod Trail Southwest, High River. That is Legal Land Description Plan 2658T, Block B, and no lot number.
The summary of the appeal related documents are included in the agenda package, and the board members have reviewed these materials. For the record, the package includes the following documents, which I'll briefly list as we display the agenda on the screen. 1. The Major Development Permit Application Summary. 2. The Variance Application Summary. 3. List of variances. 4. Proposed drawings. 5. Notice of decision issued November 21st, 2025. Number 6. Notice of appeal submitted December 10th, 2025. Receipt for appeal payment made December 12th, 2025. The notice of hearing was issued and circulated as required under the Municipal Government Act and the town's public notification bylaw. number 4577/2020. Move on to the Development Appeal. I'll now have the Development Authority to present their submission. Please.
Mr. Chair, sorry to interrupt, but just had a question about the matters that are that are part of the record. Sorry, my name is Robert Homersham. I'm a lawyer for the appellant. I did submit a document yesterday, I believe, and I would ask that it form part of the record. It's excerpts from a book on statutory interpretation, which I intend to refer to in my oral submission. So I do have extra copies of it, hard copies as well. So I would like that to form part of the record, please.
We can share, just as the clerk, that we have shared that with the board, and they have been provided with a printout as well of what you shared yesterday.
Thank you. I do have hard copies if there's anyone else in attendance that wishes to have it also.
Oh, we could put that on the side so that if there is anyone in the gallery that wishes to follow along, would that be best for you?
I'm fine with that. Thank you. I'll just do that now.
Just as clerk, just want to remind that when you are presenting, you can say next slide. If there is a page number that you specifically want me to start at, I can do that as well. So just let me know where you would like me to go.
Perfect. So I would like to go down to the PowerPoint slides, which were part of the submission. I can figure that out here. The PowerPoint presentation starts on page 89. Okay. You can actually just start with the second slide. That's just the title page. Thank you so much. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the board. My name is Sarah Peck, and I'm the Senior Planner at the Town of High River. I'm appearing today on behalf of the Development Authority of the Town of High River to speak in support of the refusal of Development Permit Application 2004-15 for 605 McLeod Trail. The Planning Division at the Town of High River accepted the above noted application before you today as complete on October 27th of 2025. The application was then circulated and reviewed, and the application was formally refused on November 21st, 2025, because the Development Authority was not supportive of 4 of the 5 variances that were requested, and the Development Authority did not believe that the design met the standards of Section 3.4.21 of the Land Use Bylaw concerning the design, character, and appearance of buildings. While the use is residential and is permitted under our land use bylaw, the Development Authority has determined that the proposed built form does not align with the established streetscape or the overall goals of the High Rivers land use bylaw and town plan, which the land use bylaw is implemented to advance. The following presentation will provide the planning rationale for this refusal decision, specifically focusing on how the proposal's massing and architectural scale would unduly detract from the public realm and would materially interfere or affect with the enjoyment of the neighboring lots. Next slide, please. Thank you. The Development Authority's decision was based on 4 key considerations. Number 1, consistency with the town plan. The town plan emphasizes the importance of maintaining High River's small town character through thoughtful and through responsible growth. The proposal, in our view, exceeds the established scale of the surrounding neighborhood, directly contravening Goal 1 of the town plan, referring to small town feel. The consistency with the land use bylaw, design, character, and appearance of buildings. That's point number 2. High River's form-based code evaluates developments based on their contribution to the pedestrian experience and to the architectural cohesion. This proposal, in the Development Authority's view, disrupts the visual continuity of the area and would unduly impact the character of the neighborhood. Number 3 on the slide is consistency with the land use bylaw variance test. The Development Authority found the design as submitted would unduly detract from the public realm and negatively affect the use and enjoyment of neighborhood properties, even though the residential use itself is a permitted use under the land use bylaw. And then finally, number 4, requested variances. The Development Authority does not believe that 4 out of the 5 variances that were requested as part of this application are appropriate. They appear to be necessitated solely by the proposal's massing rather than unique site constraints. Next slide, please. The applicant proposed a 25-unit residential rental development. The proposal is a single building consisting of 3 stories, fully above grade, and then 1 story that is partially below grade and partially above grade. The property is zoned Traditional Neighborhood District, or TND. The zone allows for residential uses. There were 5 variances considered from the land use bylaw as part of this application. The proposal has a height of approximately 17.21 meters. That's approximately 56 feet and 5.5 inches from grade to peak. The roof height above the highest story is 6.617 meters, or 21 feet, 8.5 inches. While this complies with the land use bylaw and is not considered a variance, the compliance is based on the land use bylaw's method of measuring height by stories. In this case, the lowest level of this building is considered to be the basement. So it is only considered to be a 3-story building. It qualifies as a basement only because it extends slightly further below grade at 5 feet 5 inches, as opposed to its extent above the grade, which is just 5 feet. Next slide. This is a key map of the subject property. It is on the corner of McLeod Trail Southwest and 6th Street Southwest, and the property is approximately 0.117 hectares in size. Next slide. The property is within the southwest part of the town of High River. This map shows the location. Next slide. The property is currently vacant. There was a house on the property previously. It has been moved. The house was discussed in the town's residential heritage inventory project 2, but it is important to note that it was never formally protected by bylaw. Next slide. This slide shows the site conditions prior to the house removal. It contained a 2-story house with a detached garage, and it also had a crescent driveway onto both McLeod Trail Southwest and 6th Street Southwest, as well as the laneway. Next slide, please. As previously discussed in my presentation, the appellant requested several variances to the applicable land use bylaw requirements. Overall, the Development Authority does not support the proposal as its massing, form, and overall design raised significant concerns to the Development Authority about the development's ability to integrate with the surrounding neighborhood context. This application, as I said, contains 5 variances. We were unable to support 4 out of 5 of these variances. I will go through each one of the variances contained on the slide one by one. Next slide, please. The first variance for discussion in this presentation is the front yard setback, allowing the building to be 8.58 meters as opposed to somewhere in between 2 meters to 6 meters from McLeod Trail Southwest. Next slide. The Development Authority had no concerns regarding this variance. The land use bylaw standard is 2 to 6 meters, as I said previously, from the front property line. The reason for this is to encourage a strong relationship between the new building and the public realm. However, the town still believes that this can be accomplished with the proposed courtyard, and the increased setback helps preserve the mature trees on the property, which the town believes is of value. Next slide, please. The second variance under discussion relates to the frontage build-out, which would allow the developer to provide less building frontage along McLeod Trail than the land use bylaw requires. To meet the standard, which is 65% of the front property line to be built out, the building would need to be approximately 5 meters wider. This requirement exists to ensure that buildings help to define and enclose the public realm and to create a comfortable environment for pedestrians. Minimizing these gaps, particularly along very prominent streets, is important for maintaining an appealing and a cohesive streetscape. Next slide. Thank you. The Development Authority does not support this variance. The variance is needed, in the Development Authority's view, to accommodate vehicle access off of McLeod Trail Southwest and associated parking and internal drive aisle, in addition to using the laneway. The Development Authority does not believe that it is reasonable to have this compromise for the pedestrian environment in this way to support a vehicle access to accommodate traffic that is generated by the proposed development that the Development Authority believes to be excessive in massing. Next slide, please. The third variance concerns the width of the vehicle access from McLeod Trail. The original crescent-shaped driveway had a single width access at this location. The developer is now proposing a 7.08 meter wide driveway to allow for two-way traffic along with 1 meter flares on each side. It is important to note that the flares are not part of this variance request. Under the land use bylaw, vehicle access width refers only to the width of the driveway on the private property. It does not include the portions within the public right-of-way, such as curved flares. Next slide. The Development Authority does not support this variance. The Development Authority, again, does not believe that it is reasonable to compromise the pedestrian environment with a wider vehicle access over the sidewalk in this way to support a vehicle access to accommodate traffic generated by the proposed development that the Development Authority believes to be excessive in massing. It is important to note that there is a laneway. The Development Authority believes that the development at a more appropriate scale could accommodate traffic through the laneway. Next slide. The fourth variance relates to the number of vehicle accesses. The developer is proposing a vehicle access off of McLeod Trail, which is in addition to the laneway, and a variance is required for this. Next slide. The Development Authority does not support this variance. The site currently has 2 access points in addition to the laneway access, arranged as a crescent-shaped driveway. The appellant proposed to remove the existing 6th Street Southwest access entirely and relocate the McLeod Trail Southwest access further to the west, aligning it with the proposed parking area on the west side of the property. The Development Authority does not believe that it is reasonable to compromise the pedestrian environment with a vehicle access over the sidewalk in this way to accommodate the traffic generated by a proposed development that the Development Authority believes to be excessive in scale and massing. It is important to note, again, there is a laneway. Laneways are intended to serve as the only point of vehicular access for new developments, reducing the number of driveways and access points that are going onto public streets and sidewalks that would further fragment the pedestrian network. This position upholds one of the 2 Town of High River land use bylaw guiding principles, which is, and I quote, "A pedestrian as a universal measure of design. The Town of High River is to be designed based on a scale that is comfortable to people, encourages walking, accommodates a variety of functions, can change and adapt over time, and will foster an environment that supports and reinforces the social aspects of the town." Next slide. Finally, the 5th variance concerns landscaped area. This is the area, landscaped area, that is landscaped with trees and shrubs. The land use bylaw requires 40% landscaped area on multi-unit developments such as this. The town believes that this 40% is an appropriate amount to ensure that the site has a functional outdoor space, considering the number of proposed residents, and does not feel too crowded considering that people living in these types of units will not be having their own backyards. A minimum of 40% landscaping also supports some key urban design objectives. It enhances site beautification, reduces urban heat island effects, and increases the permeability for rainwater. Increasing the proportion, these benefits are diminished when landscaping is reduced in favor of expanded hard surface areas. Increasing the proportion of the parking area at the expense of landscaping introduces more impermeable surfaces, contributes to heat island conditions, and creates additional challenges for on-site drainage and for stormwater management. Next slide. In contrast, the developer is proposing only 24.94% of the site as landscaped area. The Development Authority does not support this variance. It is the town's understanding that the landscaped area reduction is largely driven by parking. The Development Authority does not believe that it is reasonable to compromise the 40% landscaped area requirement again, to facilitate a development that in the Development Authority's view is excessive in scale and massing. Next slide. Under the Town of High River land use bylaw, a variance can only be granted if the development, at the discretion of the Development Authority, would not, and this is a quote, unduly interfere with the amenities of the neighborhood, detract from the public realm, or materially interfere with or affect the use, enjoyment, or value of neighboring lots, and the use proposed is allowed by this bylaw. Under the Municipal Government Act, Section 640(6)(1, and I quote, a land use bylaw may authorize a development authority to decide on an application for a development permit, even though the development of a permit does not comply with the land use bylaw or is a non-conforming building if, in the opinion of the development authority, the proposed development would not unduly interfere with the amenities of the neighborhood or materially interfere with or affect the use, enjoyment, or value of the neighboring parcels of land, and the proposed development conforms with the use prescribed for that land or building in the land use bylaw. The Development Authority was unable to support this application as presented, as it does believe that the variances were facilitating a design that would, in the Development Authority's opinion, detract from the public realm and would materially interfere with the enjoyment of neighboring lots, particularly due to massing, as well as prioritizing car-centered elements over the actual requirements of the land use bylaw. Next slide, please. The town met with the appellant on December 2nd, 2024, March 13th, 2025, April 3rd, 2025, June 25th, 2025, and September 4th, 2025, throughout the pre-application process. Throughout this process, the town's goal has been to support development that aligns with the land use bylaw, its guiding principles, and the town plan. At the initial meeting, that was the one on December 2nd, 2024, the appellant presented an early concept ranging from 12 to 14 units, but also did indicate the possibility of increasing the density to as many as 24. Town administration reviewed all relevant land use bylaw requirements, and the applicant was to determine how they wish to proceed moving forward. At subsequent meetings, the March and April ones, the appellant began to have more clarity that they would likely be applying for variances to land use bylaw standards. The town confirmed that all variances would be examined using the town's two guiding principles, one of which is a pedestrian as a universal measure of design. The town of High River is to be designed based on a scale that is comfortable to people, encourages walking, accommodates a variety of functions, can change and adapt over time, and will foster an environment that supports and reinforces the social aspects of the town. And the second one is stewardship through sustainable design. The town, the community, and the development industry act as stewards for the High River of tomorrow. All development shall focus on long-term quality over short-term gains. Next slide, please. In May, the town sent an email to the developer regarding the requested variances. In the email, staff noted which variances the town was, quote, open to supporting, while working to minimize them as much as possible during the internal circulation period for review. This is standard for the town, as we typically find that we can work with developers during the review period to ensure that proposals fit the community and fulfill the original intent of the area's regulations. Next slide, please. The next meeting was convened specifically to address some emerging concerns that the town of High River had with the design, including scale and massing of the proposed building, impacts on neighborhood character, and concerns that were being raised by residents of the town. During this meeting, the appellants confirmed that their initial concept of 12 to 15 units would not be financially viable, and they would not be able to reduce the number of units. The town clarified that it must evaluate the proposal not on financial feasibility for the applicant, but on planning merit, neighborhood compatibility, and alignment with town documents. Administration recommended that the appellant reduce the massing. Next slide, please. At the final meeting, before the application was accepted by the town of High River, staff confirmed that the massing still remained a concern. The town reiterated that once the application is formally circulated and the formal internal review process begins, administration will carefully and thoroughly review all aspects of the proposal against the land use bylaw and against the town plan. This is the case for all applications that come forward to the town of High River, and that includes those that do not involve variances to ensure that new development fits appropriately into the community. Next slide, please. Over the course of the town's interactions with the appellant, administration explained the relevant planning documents, explained the town's guiding principles, flagged concerns about scale, massing, and neighborhood character, and the community feedback, and finally recommended reducing the massing of the proposal. The town gave the developer an actionable path to move forward to reduce the massing. The appellant made the choice to submit an application without addressing that concern. However, it is the town's responsibility to evaluate proposals based on planning merit, neighborhood compatibility, in alignment with the land use bylaw and with the town plan. It is important to clarify that the formal comprehensive review of any development proposal occurs only after the town receives a complete application package. Before an application is submitted formally, the town can provide general guidance, identify potential issues, and outline the relevant policies and standards that will apply. However, it is not reasonable or even possible for the town to conduct a full technical review before we have these finalized plans, specific variance requests, stated rationale statements, and any required studies. The appellant was advised of the concerns as they emerged, but the town cannot pre-review a design that has not yet been formally submitted. Next slide, please. The Development Authority also does not support the application as presented because it has concerns with the proposal's overall compliance with the land use bylaw, specifically with respect to section 3.4.21, which is design, character, and appearance of buildings. The design, character, and appearance of buildings section states that the size, location, and design, character, and appearance of any building or structure requiring a development permit shall be acceptable to the Development Authority, having due regard to the policies and objectives contained within the town's statutory plans, any studies adopted as guidelines regarding heritage buildings and historic resources, vistas, streetscapes, parking, mobility, public art, and open space, the character of existing development in this land use district, including but not necessarily limited to facing materials, building mass, and architectural detailing, the character of the existing development in this land use district, as well as on adjacent land use districts and parcels, unless the building or structure at the discretion of the development authority sets a higher standard of design, character, and appearance for this land use district or part of it, and finally, other factors such as daylight, sunlight, and privacy. Next slide, please. The design submitted was not found to be acceptable to the development authority. There were several variances that were requested that the development authority did not support because the development authority does not believe that it is reasonable to compromise the pedestrian environment and benefits of landscaped area to accommodate the proposed development as shown on the screen that the development authority believes to be excessive in massing. Next slide, please. The development authority does not believe that the proposed development meets section 1.1A.3 of the town plan, which requires, quote, the town shall ensure the form and character of new developments respect and complement existing neighborhood character. The purpose of this policy is to emphasize the importance of a cohesive, scaled streetscape, typically defined by compatible building heights, massing, and architectural styles. The proposed building, however, is noticeably taller and heavier in massing than its surroundings. This divergence disrupts the continuity and visual rhythm of the neighborhood and fails to respect or complement the existing character as this Town of High River policy requires. Next slide, please. There are many 1- or 2-story single detached dwellings in the immediate area. Next slide. There are also some that are a bit bigger in massing. The house next door, for example, it is 2 stories, but is a bit taller than most of the 2-story houses around that area. There's also a semi-detached dwelling that's being developed on 6th Street Southwest by the hospital, and it's 2 stories plus a basement. And there are some apartment buildings with 2 stories fully above grade and 1 story partially below, partially above. And there's also a 3-story historic building that has become a business. Next slide, please. There is also, of course, the High River Hospital, which is a 3-story building, and the neighboring annex building used by the hospital for their various office spaces and meetings. There's also the Spitzy School and a church. Next slide. The town understands that the appellant has provided 4 reasons for their appeal. Actually, next slide, sorry. One more. Thank you. The town understands that the appellant has provided 4 reasons for their appeal. The development permit application required 4 variances from the development standards for the traditional neighborhood district. In its reasons for refusal, and this is a quote from their appeal statement, the DA's rationale for not supporting the variances is, with respect to each variance, that the number of units for the development is excessive as in the variances would not be required if the development had fewer than the 25 proposed residential units. And they further say that that the density is not a development standard under the TND. The second statement is that the DA failed to apply the proper variance test under section 3.4.20 of the land use bylaw, and that the appellant's position that these variances would have met the variance test under the land use bylaw if they will meet the test for variances under section 683 3D of the Municipal Government Act. Thirdly, they state that the DA failed to follow the town's policy for consulting with the Committee of the Whole on variance applications with infill areas of the town. And then finally, such further and other reasons the appellant may raise prior to the meeting. Next slide, please. Section 3.4.20 of the land use bylaw states that the development authority may allow a variance of any or all of the requirements of this bylaw through an application where, at the discretion of the development authority, the development would not interfere with the amenities of the neighborhood, detract from the public realm, or materially interfere with or affect the use, enjoyment, or value of neighboring lots, and the use proposed is allowed by this bylaw. And then section 687 3D of the Municipal Government Act states that the board hearing the appeal may make an order or decision or issue or confirm the issue of a development permit, even though the proposed development does not comply with the land use bylaw if, in its opinion, the proposed development would not unduly interfere with the amenities of the neighborhood or materially interfere with or affect the use, enjoyment, or value of neighboring parcels of land, and the proposed development conforms with the use prescribed for that land or building in the land use bylaw. The development authority believes that the design would detract from the public realm, particularly regarding the car-centered infrastructure, instead of requiring the landscaped area and frontage build-out. The development authority also believes that it would interfere with the enjoyment of the surrounding lots, particularly due to the scale and the massing. The development authority does not believe that supporting the development in its current design would be in support of protecting the, quote, small town feel, which is goal 1 of the town plan, which in part seeks to preserve the unique character of this community. Next slide, please. Item number 2 is that the DA failed to follow the town's policy for consulting with the Committee of the Whole on variance applications in the infill areas of town. The town does have a policy 22-10900, that directs the Development Authority to bring variance applications within a certain geographical area to the Committee of the Whole. It is important to note that Council has delegated authority in the land use bylaw to town administration to be the development authority for the town and to render decisions on development permit applications. While this process allows the development authority to keep members of the council informed about applications and to seek their feedback, the decision on approval of the development permit remains with the development authority, which is administration. Regardless of the feedback from the Committee of the Whole, the development authority retains the delegated authority to decide whether or not to approve each application. Also, the submissions communicating lack of support from neighboring residents reinforces that the criteria for accepting a variance was not met, eliminating the need for council review and feedback from a practicality and efficiency standpoint. Next slide, please. Item number 3 was that the DA misapplied section 3.4.21 of the land use bylaw, which gives the DA broad planning discretion to a permitted use application. Section 3.4.21, which is design, character, and appearance of buildings in the land use bylaw, states the size, location, design, character, and appearance of any building or structure requiring a development permit shall be acceptable to the development authority, having due regard to the policies and objectives contained within the town's statutory plans, any studies adopted as guidelines regarding heritage buildings and historic resources, vistas, streetscapes, parking, mobility, public art, and open space, the character of existing development in this land use district, including but not necessarily limited to facing materials, building mass, and architectural detailing, the character of existing development in this land use district, as well as the effect on adjacent land use districts and parcels, unless the building or structure at the discretion of the development authority sets a higher standard of design, character, and appearance for this land use district or part of it, and other factors such as daylight, sunlight, and privacy. Next slide, please. In addition, it is important to note that section 1.1a of the town plan provides policies for existing neighborhoods, including that form and character of new developments, respect and complement the existing neighborhood character, and that's section 1.1a.3 of the town plan. As stated earlier, the development authority does believe that the design as proposed would detract from the public realm the existing community character and would materially affect the use and enjoyment, particularly due to scale and massing and fragmentation of the pedestrian network. Next slide. I think I'm off track again.
Another slide.
Thank you.
One more.
Okay. While the area includes a variety of building types, the existing developments, is that number 30? It doesn't matter. The existing developments, including larger buildings such as the Noble Tea House, demonstrate a built form that emphasize architectural interest, human scale proportions, and thoughtful massing, achieving a balanced relationship between the structure, landscaping, and public realm, supported by an unfragmented pedestrian network that is not compromised by vehicle-oriented choices. Are we on slide 4?
This is next one.
Okay. Features such as fully compliant landscaped areas that come with benefits, such as reduced heat island impacts, enjoyment for residents, and unfragmented pedestrian connections all contribute to a development pattern that prioritizes the pedestrian experience rather than vehicle-oriented design choices. Now that the parcel is a vacant site, it should be treated as a greenfield opportunity, where compliance with the land use bylaw and alignment with current standards are expected. In the view of the Development Authority, the proposal's excessive massing, combined with a site design that prioritizes parking at the expense of landscaping, would detract from the public realm and would affect the enjoyment of the neighboring lots. And finally, item 4, such further and other reasons that the appellant may raise prior to the hearing. The Development Authority does not currently know what this may refer to. However, the Development Authority is prepared to address anything further raised by the appellant at the appeal hearing. Next slide In conclusion, yes, the Development Authority's decision to refuse this application reflects its responsibility under the Town of High River's land use bylaw and the town plan to preserve the unique neighborhood character of High River's communities. The Development Authority's decision is based, again, on these 4 key considerations. Consistency with the town plan emphasizes the importance of maintaining High River's small-town character through thoughtful and responsible growth. The proposal exceeds the established scale of the surrounding neighborhood, directly contributing Goal 1 of that plan. Consistency with the land use bylaw, design, character, and appearance of buildings. The Town of High River's form-based code evaluates developments based on their contribution to the pedestrian experience and neighborhood cohesion, architectural cohesion. The proposed design disrupts the visual continuity of the area and would unduly impact the character of the neighborhood. 3, consistency with the land use bylaw. That's the variance test. The Development Authority finds the design as submitted would unduly detract from the public realm and negatively affect the use and enjoyment of neighboring properties, even though the residential use itself is permitted under the land use bylaw. And finally, 4, regarding the requested variances, the Development Authority does not believe that 4 out of the 5 variances that were requested are appropriate. They appear to be necessitated solely by the proposal's massing rather than any unique site constraints. For these reasons, we, the Development Authority, respectfully urge the board to uphold the Development Authority's denial of the application, as doing so protects the town's guiding principles for development and preserves the integrity and character of High River's built environment, including the subject traditional neighborhood district. That concludes the Development Authority's presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah and the DA. Does the appellant have any questions or require clarity on any part of the Development Authority's presentation prior to your presentation?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think our questions and our position, as it contradicts that presented by the Development Authority, will come clear through our presentation, so I have no specific questions at this point.
Thank you. I'll now invite the appellant or their representative to present their submission.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. My name is Robert Homersham, as I introduced myself earlier. I'm a lawyer, and I've been practicing for almost 30 years in commercial real estate in Calgary and the surrounding municipalities mainly, but also throughout this province. My practice for the majority of that time is focused on land use planning and development, and I'm representing Mr. Jordan Laporte, who is the owner of the subject property in this appeal, but Mr. Laporte will also speak. You have, as part of the record of this hearing, the written submissions on behalf of the appellant, myself, Mr. Laporte, and Mr. Laporte's architect, Al Fritz, have each submitted in writing for consideration by the board and the other affected parties. So what I intend to do is I'll make what we'll call introductory remarks, and then the order of presentation, if the board will permit, will be Mr. Laporte, who will summarize the development permit application process. And then after that, Mr. Fritz, who, as I said, is the architect who designed, submitted the development permit application plans. He will go through those plans and also walk the board through the alternative plans that were prepared for this hearing, which are alternative in the sense that they have no variances required. And then I'll come back and present on how the Development Authority improperly applied what I'll call its general planning discretion to this permitted use application. And I'll emphasize, but I'll say it now, that the board has before it what we believe are two choices. The first one is, once you've heard our submissions, to approve the original development permit application by granting the 4 variances that were discussed by the Development Authority and that you're aware of, because we believe they meet the test, and the test that the board has to apply to a variance is under 687(3)D of the Municipal Government Act. It's a very similar test to what the Development Authority in the first instance applies to a variance, but that test is found in the land use bylaw. So that's our first position, that if the board is satisfied that those variances that are required for the original development permit application meet the test of 687(3)D of the MGA, it is our submission that the board then, because this is a permitted use with development standard variances that you've approved, you must issue the development permit. Alternatively, your second choice in our view is that if you don't approve the original DP because you think one or more of the variances doesn't meet that test, we have before you a no variance application. So those 4 variances that we're asking you to review and approve to ultimately issue this development permit, we have addressed each of those and reduced those variances to not being a variance. So that is the alternative plan before you is a application with no variances for a permitted use, and under the law, which I will go through at the end in my presentation in chief, I'll call it, I will set out why a permitted use that meets the development standards under, in this case, the traditional neighborhood district is entitled to a development permit approval, and the board or the Development Authority in the first instance, if that were the case, would have to issue a development permit approval. So before I ask Mr. Laporte to come up and make his presentation, I do have a request of the board, and I think it's important. We do have a significant number of people here today who I believe, judging from the applause at least, are largely against this appeal, and many of whom wish to speak today against the appeal and in favor of the Development Authority's refusal decision. I have no objection to those wishing to be heard today, whether that was in writing in the written submissions that form part of the record, or orally, or both, provided that they have standing to do so. I note that many of the letters submitted to the board expressing objection to this development do not contain an address. It is not enough to gain standing, if you will, to be heard by this board to simply be a resident of High River. Any person that wishes to address this board in writing or orally must be an affected person, and that's a defined term. So it is incumbent, I would suggest, on this board to verify the eligibility of each person who has submitted a letter or wishes to address the board today, or both. That eligibility, that eligibility comes from an individual being an affected person the test for which is described, I'll say in the first instance, in the land use bylaw under section 4.2.1 sub E. And that test is as follows. And this is the test that the Development Authority applies for giving notice of a development permit application, but it has resonance to the affected person test. So that test is as follows. The Development Authority may mail a notice to all landowners within 40 meters of the site or post a notice on the site of an application for a development permit to request comments from persons who may be affected prior to rendering a decision. So a person affected by a DP application, according to the land use bylaw, is a landowner within 40 meters of the subject site. And I would ask how many people here today, sitting behind me, who wish to address the board, own land within 40 meters of the subject property. And I do note that the notice of appeal, to give notice of what we're doing here today, of course, it was mailed to only 2 landowners. It's in the record, and those addresses are, if I can read my own writing, 522 McLeod Trail and 817 6th Street Southwest. So just the fact that there is a general notice posted on the site or on the town's website, just by virtue of receiving that does not give you status as an affected person that has the standing to address this board. And I would suggest to this board that there's no reason to deviate from this 40-meter test that's applied to a person affected by a development permit application. Now, under Section 681, sub D of the Municipal Government Act, and I'll quote, "The board hearing an appeal must hear any other person," so other than the applicant, appellant, the Development Authority, "who claims to be affected by the decision and that the SDAB agrees to hear." I've left some parts out of that direct quote, but that's the gist of it. So the legal test that has been applied for affected persons wishing to address a development permit appeal, it's set out in the case that I provided to you today, Diamond in the City of Calgary, and there's copies for others that wish to refer to it. So that legal test is for whether an individual is an affected person for the purpose of having standing to file a development permit appeal, but analogously, it's a test for also who can address the board. A test for determining whether an individual is an affected person, and I'm quoting from the decision at paragraph 15. The test for determining whether an individual is an affected person, so they're under 685 of the MGA, and that test is specific to who may file an appeal other than the applicant. So affected persons who have standing to file an appeal. So that also analogously should apply to those who can speak to an appeal, that haven't filed an appeal but wish to speak because they believe they're affected. So that test for determining whether an individual is an affected person has been interpreted by the courts in various cases. I'm quoting here. That a person believes he is affected is not enough. An affected person must demonstrate that he is genuinely and relevantly or seriously affected by the proposed development. The board, in many of its decisions, has stated that the further away a person is from a development, the less likely or significantly affected the person would be, and the less likely he would avail himself of an appeal or to speak to an appeal. So I would ask that the board ensure that each individual who submitted a letter or who intends to speak to this appeal today meet that test that's enumerated in that case I provided. And I think analogously, the test is landowners within 40 meters, because that is the test that the Development Authority applies for who should get notice of a development permit application. Now, I can take questions on that now, or I can take questions at the end of the rest of my presentation, but whatever the board prefers, I'm in your hands. But if you have no questions now, I'll ask Mr. Laporte to make his presentation.
Oh, you can go ahead. We'll have questions at the end. Thank you.
All right, can you hear me? Okay. A little closer? Okay, perfect. And that's my PowerPoint there. Jody, if you want to load that up. Oh, sorry. Speak up. Okay, that's my PowerPoint there if we want to go through the slides. Okay.
Can everybody in the back hear?
You have to really lean into it.
If you lean into it, yeah, try to speak a little.
Okay, is this better?
Yeah.
Okay.
Like,
Okay, thank you, members of the board. The Development Authority provided a high-level summary of communications during the review of this application. However, that summary did not reflect the lack of consistency in how the application was handled over time. There was an abrupt shift in the approach taken by the Development Authority at a certain part in the process. So for proper context, I would just like to outline the timeline of the application and corresponding communications supported by email records. So if we go to slide 3, December 2nd, 2024 was my initial meeting with the town prior to acquiring the property. The land use bylaw was communicated, as well as the town's development permit process. They outlined that the first steps would be to submit a concept plan, and it'll be circulated through their planning department and internal divisions, and then they'll provide comments prior to us submitting a full application. If we go to slide 4. So after learning about the land use bylaw in the traditional neighborhood district, December 21st, 2024, my wife and I put the property under contract, and we hired an architect. Slide 5. March 11th, we had a concept plan for the 25-unit building drawn up with the architect. We hired a very experienced architect whose suggestion was to go over a few items with the town, sort of a pre-concept plan meeting, with the first topic being architectural form and character. The planning department seemed to like our farmhouse modern design, and the next step was for them to do a more thorough review of the plans and have their engineer review, as per the email in slide 7. Slide 9. On March 25th, after a couple weeks of the town's initial review, they identified 12 variances. Some we were aware of, some we were not. No discussion regarding density, scaling, or mass. We had a meeting, slide 10, on April 3rd, and 12 variances seemed a bit excessive to the town. It was communicated that it's not uncommon to have variances, but they asked if we could reduce those to fall closer in line with the land use bylaw, which we thought was totally reasonable. Slide 12. April 16th, we made changes to our plans and we reduced the variances. We kept the density at 25 units, kept the overall design of the building, and we sent that concept in for review. Slide 15. 3 weeks later, on May 5th, the town completed their second circulation pre-review. They communicated that there are still variances. However, we were closer to being able to submit. They communicated that they'd be willing to support the second access point off McLeod Trail if we could submit a stamped engineered letter stating the catch basin would function properly. So we paid for a civil engineer to do an assessment of the catch basin. No discussion about density, massing, character. Slide 17. On May 8th, that's slide 17. There we go. May 8th, during their review, the town identified that there were still 8 variances. 6, however, would be supportable. 2, they felt that we could eliminate by modifying a few things with the design. We go to the next slide. So that gave us confidence. My wife and I, we closed on the property on May 15th. We took possession of the property. So things were moving in the right direction. We were working to eliminate those 2 variances, and we were days away from submitting our complete application. If we go to slide 21.
Sorry, I'm having difficulty equating your slide number to the page numbers. So if I'm not on the right page, if you can let me know.
I think it's slide 21, not page slide, I think.
Yeah, I am looking at the page numbers in the entire agenda. I do not have the actual slide numbers. Even if you can tell me what the slide has on it, then I can find the right page.
The date is June 24th, so it should be around page 21.
This
There
guy?
we go, that's the one.
Okay, thank you. Sorry about that.
Okay.
I will follow along as best as I can.
Okay, sorry. Okay, so on June 24th, the town requested an urgent meeting stating, we've heard a number of concerns from different stakeholders in the town regarding the scope of the proposal. If we go to the next slide. The meeting was with Sarah, Gennady, and Khalid, and the summary was basically this. Some neighbors heard about your proposal. We don't know how they found out. They called the mayor, and the mayor told us to tell you that you need to lower the density or this is not going to happen. So I was a bit blindsided. We were literally days from submission on a permitted use development. This was also the first time that any concerns of density or massing were brought up. If you go to the next slide. So I asked about the review process because we just spent a couple months in concept review with the DA. And they explained that the DA reviews internally by staff, not with council, but they made it clear that they place significant weight on the council's input. The planning department also made it clear that, hey, this is not us, it's community members and council members that don't want to see this. So they said that ultimately, because there are variances, this will need to go through an infill variance policy, where the council members must review this and give their feedback. And that policy is slides 24 to 26. So it should be the next couple slides there for reference. So this didn't sit well, but I figured if we could submit its permitted use, and ultimately if it comes down to the council's input, then I would be able to have my chance to take their questions, discuss the variances, provide some justification for the variances at the committee of the whole meeting, knowing that we could still execute this build without any variances, but we felt that the variances would help with the aesthetic and the accessibility to the building, and the building not being so forward on McLeod Trail and set back a bit. So on July 4th, we submitted, and from there, it was probably the most discouraging of a process I think that it could have been. We got an incomplete letter from the town, a lot of public pressure, more public pressure. Our development was brought up in council meetings months prior to them accepting our file as complete. If we go to slide 29, which is I think the next one. Maybe the one after that. There we go. I had this clipped in video, but we had to switch this to a PDF. But you can certainly look this up. July 14th, council meeting, the mayor communicates that he's got grave concern with the variances. And ultimately, it needs to go through the committee of the whole as a backstop through the infill variance policy, which is why they put that into effect. So he's assuring the public that, hey, this is not a done deal. It's got to go through us first. So more incomplete letters, more community discussion, a file manager change by the town. We ended up eliminating the height variance just due to a lot of public feedback. A lot more back and forth, and then finally on October 27th, slide 49. So. There we go. Finally, the application was accepted. And if we go to the next slide. Sarah emailed us that our development will be on the agenda for the committee of the whole meeting as per the infill variance policy. She outlined what planning was going to present. I communicated back that the architect and I will be there to discuss the variances and answer any questions. If we go to slide 52, so 2 more over. Then a few days later, she emailed us saying that we're not on the agenda anymore. No reason why, no other communication. Then the next slide, we got a refusal letter sent by the DA, so we didn't even have our chance to discuss with council. So I retained a planning lawyer, Bob Hammersham, to get advice on what my options were. One of them being to appeal the refusal, which is what we're doing here today. Mr. Hammersham also expressed concerns about the town's mayor and council weighing in on the decision for this development permit application when the land use bylaw clearly delegates council's authority to decide on DP applications except those applications in direct control districts, which is 4.1.1 of the land use bylaw. The development authority shall administer this bylaw and decide upon all development permit applications except this in direct control districts where council is authorized to be the development authority. So council clearly delegated its authority to the development authority, yet it was also clearly pressure brought on by the mayor and council that ultimately influenced the DA's decision on this application. That's my presentation. Happy to answer any questions from the board.
I don't have any at this time. We can move to the second part, and then I'll wrap up at the end.
I don't think we have any questions at this time. Does the Development Authority have any questions or require any clarity on any part of the appellant's presentation before we continue?
No, we do not. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Chair, sorry to interrupt. I was just going to reintroduce Al Fritz, the architect, who will present.
Oh, yeah, sorry about that. Yeah. Go ahead, Mr. Fritz.
Can you hear me okay? Thank you very much. My name is Alvin Fritz. I'm an architect from Lethbridge, Alberta. I work across Western Canada from Ontario to British Columbia and have been practicing in that region for the last 40 years. When we develop a design for a project, we use the bylaw as a guide, almost like a recipe book, for the parts and pieces that can come together. And all of the discussion around density and height and massing and on is already answered through that regulatory documentation. And so we did make some submissions on variances, and I'll explain that a little bit, but all of that was already predetermined when that when those design criteria were established through the bylaws. My slides are 223 to 396, and the first are impossible to read. That is just a summary of the variances. Apologize for that, Jody. Okay, so here we go. That's the start of it. Thank you very much. As architects, we occasionally recommend a variance where a modest relaxation of a prescriptive metric will yield a demonstrably better design outcome. So typically improved site organization, a safer and clearer circulation, or stronger streetscape definition and building form that better responds to the context are cases where we would suggest a variance. And so we were following the bylaws, but we made a suggestion around a few variances. The variance is not pursued to intensify development or shift impacts onto neighbors, but to achieve a higher quality, better functioning configuration while still meeting the intent of the land use bylaw, particularly the bylaw's objectives around compatibility, pedestrian experience, and avoiding an overly imposing street wall. And that's why the variances were proposed. And the way we're presenting it today, you're going to see the project as it was presented with the variances, but you're also going to see the project with no variances. And then, in a way, you can decide for yourself, well, which one is better? Was the architect correct in saying that maybe those few variances should be followed or not? Because we do have a totally compliant, without variance product in front of you, one that cannot be contested because it's determined by the bylaws. With regards to the frontage, build-out rotation of the building, so that would be the next slide, very specifically, in the original permit submission, the building orientation prioritized internal site efficiency and minimized perceived massing towards the street. However, that layout produced a frontage build-out of approximately 51.76%, which is below the 65% minimum. And from a design standpoint, the proposed variance was considered because the overall site plan remained orderly and functional, with the building's massing setbacks and operational areas configured to reduce potential off-site impacts. We saw it as a preferred and improved design, but you can choose. Look at it, decide, and determine. In evaluating the proposal against the Municipal Government Act's 6873D, which you've heard numerous times today, the development would not unduly interfere with neighborhood amenities, would not materially affect the use, enjoyment, or value of neighboring parcels, because it does not introduce additional height or intensity beyond what the district anticipated, and the key amenity considerations such as sun shadow, privacy, noise, site servicing are managed through setbacks, landscaping, and the internalization of parking and loading functions. Importantly, the land use itself remains confirming permitted, the variance related to a frontage metric, not to a use. And so when the bylaws were followed, we discovered there really is no difference. We just felt that the variance created a slight improvement. Further, the design intent included measures that directly address street impact, including the third floor step back strategy, and that is the next slide, which is specifically intended to soften the perceived massing at pedestrian level and prevent the facade from reading as overly imposing along the primary street landscape. In layman's terms, if you get a very tall wall without any articulation, you experience that wall. If it steps back, you only experience the floors that you experience, right? And that's why that whole idea of stepping back the facade at the upper levels is recommended, and it was followed. That said, in response to the bylaw intent and to strengthen the building's relationship to McLeod Trail, The building has now been rotated on the site, increasing the street-facing presence and achieving a frontage build-out of 78.46%, which exceeds the bylaw requirement and brings the project fully into compliance with the frontage build-out provision. This revised orientation enhances street presence and more clearly delivers the bylaw's streetscape objective while maintaining a development that is compatible with and non-injurious to the surrounding neighborhood amenities. And again, I think it's one of those situations you can look at it and you can decide for yourselves which is the preferred geometry.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, may I have a moment? It's my understanding that we're dealing with drawings that have already been in place. Are we introducing new drawings?
At this time, Sorry, at this time, we're letting the gentleman finish, and then we'll make a case after the fact.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, the third point is the vehicle access width, the driveway width. Got success finding that? Yes, thanks, Jody. In the original scheme, we proposed a slightly wider vehicle access than the land use bylaw permits, based on a practical operational consideration typical of multi-unit residential buildings. A modest increase in driveway width can improve day-to-day functionality by accommodating passenger drop-off, deliveries, waste and recycling movements, and winter conditions, and by providing a more forgiving maneuvering environment for residents and service vehicles. In our view, that variance would have remained consistent with the MGA 6873D because it would not unduly interfere with neighborhood amenities nor materially affect adjacent parcels. Its impact is localized to this site's operations and would not change the use, the intensity, or general character of the development. The present non-variant design is got a width of 3 meters, which is 10 feet. And you could see it was very practical to suggest that perhaps the 6 meter wide would be a more reasonable contemplation. That said, in the interest of the full bylaw alignment and to reduce any potential interface with the primary street frontage, the design has been also revised to eliminate vehicular access from McLeod Trail entirely. A single 3 meter wide access is now provided from the rear lane exactly as prescribed, bringing the project into full compliance. And while 3 meters is at the lower end of what we would typically recommend for a multi-unit project, the compliant configuration has been carefully organized to still function safely and predictably, with site circulation designed to minimize conflict points and keep vehicle movements away from primary pedestrian frontage. So we concede it is still going to be functional, even though it's a little less than recommended. The number of vehicle access points, or access count, the original concept contemplated 2 access points to improve internal circulation and distribute traffic movements. From a design and operations perspective, a second access can provide better redundancy, reduce on-site turning conflicts, improve servicing efficiency, particularly for deliveries and waste collection. In our assessment, this approach would also still have satisfied the MGA 6873D, as it would not increase the intensity of the development or create off-site impacts that would undermine neighborhood amenities, provide access, design, and sightlines were appropriately managed. So regardless, the revised design now provides only 1 vehicular access point located entirely off the rear lane, no access from McLeod Trail, fully complying with Section 3410E3. This adjustment simplifies traffic movement, consolidates ingress and egress to a single controlled location, and removes any potential conflict between vehicles and street frontage, supporting the bylaw's intent to prioritize a safer, more continuous, pedestrian-oriented primary frontage and minimize driveway interruptions along the main street edge. The landscaped area. In the original configuration, the site did not achieve the required 40% landscaped area, primarily due to the constraints of the parcel and the need to accommodate building placement and functional parking circulation. From a planning and urban design perspective, we were comfortable that the landscape intent was still being met. through targeted planting, site buffering, and streetscape strategy focused on improving the public realm experience. Even if the numeric minimum was narrowly short, in our view, that approach could meet the MGA 687 3D test because it would not unduly interfere with neighborhood amenities nor materially affect the use, enjoyment, or value of adjacent parcels. The shortfall related to a quantitative threshold rather than a reduction in overall site quality or compatibility. With the building relocation and the revised parking layout, the design has now been refined to fully satisfy the bylaw requirement, increasing landscape area approximately 40.25%, thereby exceeding the minimum required under Section 3411B. This revision enables additional trees, shrubs, usable outdoor space, improving seasonal comfort, stormwater performance, the site's contribution to the streetscape while reinforcing that the development is compatible with the surrounding neighborhood and aligned with the intent of the land use bylaw. This following point with the solid waste management, we actually can make both solutions compliant because really the only difference is a small fence. In the original design, we proposed an in-ground Moloch, which is a very aesthetically positive way to manage your solid waste. We've just installed one at the Tim Hortons in Lethbridge about 2 weeks ago, and I was walking by, and people were leaning against it eating their lunch. So it gives you an indication of how aesthetically superior the solid waste is. Because we've recently implemented this solution on other sites and found it to be highly attractive, clean, visually unobtrusive, in many contexts, the Moloch approach can be an aesthetic improvement over conventional above-grade waste enclosures. It reduces apparent bulk, limits visual clutter, supports a tidier site condition adjacent to streets and pedestrian areas. So from a design standpoint, we considered the variance to be an enhancement to the public realm. It actually improved it dramatically rather than a detriment, and consistent, again, of course, with the MGA 687 3D intent. It would not adversely affect neighborhood amenities or neighboring parcels, and it does not intensify the use. Rather, it refines how servicing is integrated into the site. However, in the interest of a straightforward bylaw compliance and alignment with current municipal standards, the revised plan now utilizes a screened at-grade waste enclosure, including a 1.2 meter high screening fence with gated access, such that all waste facilities are fully screened from public view in accordance with Section 3412C. Should the board prefer the original servicing concept, we remain the view that the Moloch system is an aesthetically superior solution. In either scenario, the project will provide a high-quality, fully screened waste management approach that supports a clean streetscape and a well-managed site appearance. Permitted use, the overall design, character, and neighborhood fit. Thank you. Throughout the design process, including both the original and revised schemes, the architectural intent has remained consistent to deliver a multi-unit residential building that reads as a compatible, well-composed neighbor within a streetscape that already contains a range of residential building types and expressions. When you go through the neighborhood, you discover you've got everything from shingle style to half-timbered European architecture, a whole variety. And so for that reason, the modern farmhouse was contemplated to still have the gables, the articulation to make it attractive and appropriate. The surrounding area is not characterized by a single uniform architectural pattern. Rather, it is a collection of varied residential forms. In response, the building has been deliberately designed with a highly articulated facade, carefully scaled elements, and a massing strategy that avoids a monolithic wall effect along the street. The building is intentionally broken down in massing through articulated planes, a rhythm of facade projections and recesses and gabled roofs and roof forms that create visual variety and a residential scale. These moves produce a dynamic, human-scaled street presence that is consistent with the neighborhood's mixed character and supports pedestrian comfort. Materials and details are selected to reinforce a residential expression, adding texture, shadow, and depth, so the building reads as an appropriate, natural extension of its context, rather than an imposing insertion. Importantly, the refinements made to achieve full bylaw compliance have not diminished the design quality. They've strengthened it. The rotated orientation, improved frontage build-out, step back across the primary frontage, reinforced the intended streetscape relationship while maintaining the same architectural language. The end result is a compliant development that preserves architectural richness, contributes positively to the public realm, and supports neighborhood amenity through thoughtful scale, form, and facade articulation. In closing, this project has been deliberately and carefully designed from the very first instance. The submission reflects two clear and responsible pathways for the board's consideration. Either the original scheme, which we believe satisfies the MGA 687 3D variance test, and the revised no variance alternative, which removes all variances, is fully compliant with the Town of High River Land Use Bylaw. Importantly, both schemes were developed with the same core objectives: a compatible, well-articulated residential building that avoids an imposing street presence, safe, predictable vehicle circulation that reduces conflict along the primary frontage, a strengthened streetscape through compliant frontage build-out and step back, compliant landscaping, and fully screened waste management. The alternative, fully compliant plan demonstrates that the project can meet the bylaw's technical requirements without compromising architectural quality or neighborhood fit. For these reasons, we respectfully request the board's support of the proposed development or confirmation of the compliant alternative. And our lawyer will explain ultimately the test in some ways does not really apply to the permitted use application, and I'll let Bob speak to that. So thank you very, very much for hearing me, and if I have any questions, I'm happy to try to answer them.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fritz.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sorry, Mr. Chair, members of the board. I intend to go next, but just wanted to ask what the schedule for the rest of the afternoon. Is there a break that is planned at some point?
Sorry, guys. We do have a planned break after the affected party submissions.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chair, members of the board, Bob Homer Shem again, and I will go into the legal explanation as to why, when we're dealing with a permitted use, what discretion the Development Authority, and by extension this board, which has what is referred to in the case law as de novo jurisdiction when hearing an appeal. You have the jurisdiction to hear a matter as if it's being presented in the first instance. So it's not a true appeal. You can treat it that way if you wish, but you have broader jurisdiction. And that may go towards the question that was raised by someone in the audience about an alternative set of plans. So we are addressing the variances, which are in what I will say are the only points where discretion matters with a permitted use application. We're addressing them in two ways. We think, as you've heard, that they meet the test under 687 3D of the MGA for granting a variance. If the board disagrees with that, we have proposed as an alternative a no variance plan, where that is how we're addressing the variances. We're taking them off the table, and you have a permitted use application that requires no variances. And as I'll explain, the law with respect to that type of application is that the approving authority, the board in this instance, must approve it, must issue the permit. I've already launched into that, but I want to make a point that I asked the board earlier regarding eligibility to address the board, whether as an appellant, although you only have one appellant, but more importantly today, to speak to the appeal and speak to the development. And I think I made my point, but I would like to point out in the notice of hearing that the board sent out, and there were two, and I did mention those, there were two that went out to adjacent landowners. It does effectively define in that notice affected person, or in brackets, persons. And it does say in that notice of hearing, and which is part of the record, adjacent landowners may have the right to appeal and be heard by the Subdivision and Development Appeal Board. Affected persons include people who speak in favor of or against the decision being appealed. So the fact that that notice went out to only two adjacent landowners, I assume that that test or what was applied with respect to that notice was the 40-meter distance from the subject site. So I said in my introductory, probably lengthier than introductory remarks, but when I first started out, I said that this DP application before you is for permitted use under the traditional neighborhood district, and that the board, in our view, has two choices before it. You can determine that the variances required meet the test under 687 3D, and if you do determine that those development standards that those variances apply to will have then been met, and you have a permitted use that meets the development standards as lawfully varied, and you are obliged to issue an approval for the original DP application. Alternatively, if you don't approve all of the variances, we have, as I said, put before you an alternative that addresses those variances by taking them off the table. A design that meets all the development standards, conforms to the land use bylaw, the definition of which I'll get into, and with the alternative plan before you, you must issue the development permit. And of course, I'll explain why. Now, I'm not sure of the numbering, but I'd like to refer you to what I call my memorandum of argument. Looks like it's probably 250 thereabouts. And I'm going to refer specifically to paragraphs 22 and 23 in my memorandum. So the law governing permitted use DP applications. First, I will quote the land use bylaw, the town's land use bylaw definition of a permitted use. It says a permitted use means a use of land or of a building which is listed as permitted in a land use district for which a development permit must be issued with or without conditions by the development authority if the proposed development meets all the requirements of this bylaw. That is a variation of what in 642 sub 1 of the MGA describes what the powers of an approving authority has with respect to a permitted use application. So that 642 sub 1 of the MGA reads as follows. when a person applies for a development permit in respect of a development provided for by a land use bylaw pursuant to section 640 sub 2 sub B sub I, which is a permitted use, the development authority must, if the application otherwise conforms to the land use bylaw and is complete in accordance with 683.1 of the MGA, the development authority must issue a development permit with or without conditions as provided for in the land use bylaw. So the DPs, I'll call them before you, the original and the alternative no variance version, are for a permitted use. The original, as I said, conforms to the land use bylaw if the variances are determined to meet the test. The alternative DP conforms to the land use bylaw because it requires no variances. The phrase in both the land use bylaw definition of permitted use and in 642 sub 1 of the MGA, the phrase conforms to the land use bylaw or meets the requirements of the land use bylaw. That phrase has been interpreted to mean conformity with the bylaw's development standards, and I do reference that in my memorandum. A development standard are those objective, measurable rules that regulate, for example, parcel size, building height, setbacks, property lines, density, things that are measurable, not things that are subject to general planning discretion. So development standards are not things such as massing or compatibility or character. So in the memorandum that I submitted at paragraph 22 and then at footnote 23, it references a text that I use a lot, and I do a lot of development permit appeal work as well. But in my work, the text Planning Law and Practice by Professor Locke's, now deceased, taken over by Gwendolyn Stewart Palmer, that really is the seminal text in planning law in Alberta, and it supports the interpretation that I gave to you. On page 6 sub 6, which is I excerpted because I couldn't link it. It's a text you have to pay for, so I just copied the pages. So page 6 sub 6, which I think is at Exhibit A of the memorandum, it says, where a person applies for a permitted use, for a permit for a permitted use, the development authority must, if the application otherwise conforms to the land use bylaw, issue a development permit. And then it further says, the phrase otherwise conforms to the land use bylaw no doubt makes reference to the bylaw's development standards. And then it further goes on, excuse me, in the footnote to those quotes, that development standards regulate such matters as the area of parcels, the size of the structure, and setbacks from property lines. Now, this interpretation of permitted use DP applications was established by our Court of Appeal in the decision that I provided with my memorandum. It's called Crumpka versus Calgary's Development Appeal Board. Now, this case concerned a permitted use application in the community of Bel Air in Calgary for a single detached dwelling. And the application met all the development standards but was refused by the Development Authority, and then that refusal was upheld by the SDAB, and hence it was appealed further to the Court of Appeal, which is the path for a further appeal from an SDAB decision. It was refused on the basis that the Development Authority, on the basis of the Development Authority's broader planning discretion. And I refer you first to paragraph 18 of the Crumpka decision, and I did provide hard copies of that, but it is linked to my memorandum, so you can pull it up that way as well. But let me quote from paragraph 18 of the Krumka decision. A permitted use is one so designated for which development criteria are prescribed by the bylaw. In such case, no discretion is given to a development officer. The only prerequisite for a development permit or dispensing with it is full conformity with the relevant development criteria. The function of a development officer is then limited to determining whether there has been full conformity. And then paragraph 20 of that same case, I'll quote as well. A land use bylaw must provide for permitted uses or discretionary uses or both. It does not contemplate both such uses operating at the same time in respect of an application. If it were otherwise, the statutory distinction between the two could be readily eroded. And then next, paragraph 21 from the Krumka decision, which I will quote, and apologies, this is a fairly lengthy quote, but the court says, I accept as well-founded the distinction between permitted and discretionary uses drawn by Mr. Locks in his article, The Planning Act, at page 37. So this was the same Mr. Locks who authored Planning Law and Practice in Alberta. And that quote that the court quotes from Mr. Locks with approval is the following. The philosophy behind the distinction between permitted and discretionary uses is simply that, where uses are shown as permitted within a particular district, they are regarded to be that of a type that are clearly compatible with one another and therefore unlikely to adversely affect neighboring properties in the same district. On the other hand, discretionary uses are classed as such because, by their nature, and although generally acceptable in a particular district, they may or may not be reasonably compatible with neighboring properties, depending on the circumstances. Hence, it is necessary to confer upon the land use administrator a discretion as to whether or not a particular application to confer a discretion as to whether or not to allow, a particular application for such a use. So according to the established legal distinction then between permitted and discretionary uses, the town's development authority, I contend, erred in law by applying its discretionary powers to the permitted use application before you. Now, I'm not referring to the limited discretion given to the development authority to assess variances from the development standards. I'm referring to the general planning discretion conferred to this development authority under Section 3.4.21 of the Land Use Bylaw. But as Krumka, the court in Krumka states, a permitted use is one so designated for which development criteria are prescribed by the bylaw. In such case, no discretion is given to a development officer. So 3.4.2.1 does confer on the development authority broad planning discretion, and you heard the development authority speak to how they applied that broad discretion to the application, this DP application that was before it. But the law for a permitted use application that meets the development standards, meets those rules that are clearly measurable, height, setback, once it has applied those or applied its discretion with respect to variances to those development standards, it has no further general planning discretion, notwithstanding that the land use bylaw in this case has broader language to it. And so let me take you in particular to that section 3.4.21, which is entitled Design, Character, and Appearance of Buildings. And subsection A of that section says that the size, location, design, character, and appearance of any, and I'll emphasize any, building or structure requiring a development permit shall be acceptable to the development authority, having regard to, and then there's 4 enumerated tests, if you like, which the development authority went through. The first one I'll just read: the policies and objectives contained within the town statutory plan. So this is conferring on the development authority broad or general planning discretion. The law says you do not have broad or general planning discretion with a permitted use application. So what the board is faced with, and perhaps the development authority was faced with, I assume, is how do you reconcile this broad conference of planning discretion that's in the land use bylaw under 3.2.1A that says you should apply this to any building or structure that you're considering a development permit for within the traditional neighborhood district. How do you reconcile that with the law that says it doesn't apply to permitted use? It says any building or structure. So how you reconcile that is what is described in statutory interpretation terms as reading down. So if the general planning discretion is lawfully only to be used for a discretionary use application, then an interpreter of this land use bylaw, be it the development authority in the first instance or this board today, it's well within its jurisdiction to narrow the scope of that section 3.4.21 so that it applies only to discretionary uses. Because your job, as is the development authority's job, is to interpret the land use bylaw as it applies to the development permit application before you. So you are an interpreter of the land use bylaw, so you are vested with the power, the jurisdiction to apply principles of statutory interpretation, such as what I refer to as reading down. So I'll quote from the submission that I submitted yesterday, late, but which is before you, and I left additional copies of it. This is from a text that's often referred to in Canadian law by Ruth Sullivan called Statutory Interpretation. And I'll quote as follows: reading down is an interpretation of legislation intended to narrow the scope that it would otherwise have based on its ordinary meaning. So the ordinary meaning of 3.4.21 says you apply it to any DP application, permitted or discretionary, because it says any. Now, you apply the principle of reading down. You do this to bring that provisions in line with its purpose, to comply with presumed intent, or to avoid an absurd result. And I would add, you would do it as well to bring it in line with what the law requires. And Ms. Sullivan also says in her text statutory interpretation that it is a legitimate interpretive technique, and it's used ubiquitously, as she said. So I'm not asking you to do something that's esoteric or out of the ordinary. I'm asking you to read down section 3.4.21A so that it applies, as it should, only to discretionary use applications under the traditional neighborhood district. So having done that, the board's discretion is narrowed when considering the original DP application with its 4 variances to a consideration of those variances. That's where your discretion lies, and that's where the discretion of the development authority ought to have lied in its consideration. So we do as Mr. Fritz laid out, we do think that the variances are supportable. We think it provides a better development. We do think it meets the test, but we also are here to get an approved DP application. So it's within our rights, and given your jurisdiction, your de novo or new jurisdiction, it's within our rights to try to address those variances in the two ways that we've had. Either arguing why the variances should be granted, as we have both in our written submissions, and I've done that as well in mine, so I won't go into that part, and Mr. Fritz has gone through why those variances are supportable. But as I said, if the board chooses not to support all the variances, then you have our alternative application as to how to deal with those variances, where we've essentially eliminated them and provided you with a permitted use application with no variances to development permit standards, so meets or conforms to the land use bylaw, which means conforming to development standards. And in that case, you are left without any general planning discretion. You are left with no choice but to issue the development permit. So those are my submissions. Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board.
Thank you.
Sorry, let me just say, and I think it's part of the process, those are my submissions subject to, I think we have a right of rebuttal should we choose to avail ourselves. And of course, to answer any questions you have. Thank you.
Thank you. Does the Development Authority have any questions that require clarity on any of the parts of the appellant's presentation before we continue?
No, we do not. Thank you.
Thank you. I actually think we're going to take a small 5 to 10 minute break right now just to convene on going forward. Thank you. All right, good afternoon, everybody. We're back in session at 3:20 from our break. All right. I have a list of community members that were contacted about this, and I'm going to let you come up to speak if you wish to still do so. And when you get up to the mic, can you please state your address and name? So first, we'll go with. So if you guys, anybody who's been sent the notice, please come up to the mic and speak if you have anything you would like to share.
I first would like to make notice that the floor should be open to all members that are here, as they are affected parties. I would like to make notice that all members that have attended are affected parties and should have the right to speak. If that is not submitted by the board, right in the town bylaw, it said that affected members may be sent letters, but all members, it's not designated that only those members sent letters are affected parties. So I would like to open the floor to all members here that would like to speak.
That is fine. We just want to identify the people that have gotten the notice.
Okay.
So please go ahead and state your name and address when you get up, please, to speak.
Yeah, my name is Andy Dirksen, and I'm a resident at 815 6th Street Southwest. And I have a presentation that I'll be going through. It's quite long, so I apologize.
Sorry, just one other thing for housekeeping. As you guys go through, if anybody has any repeat comments or points that someone else has already made, please just say that you've agreed with that, just in the essence of time. Thank you.
Hello, and thank you to the Subdivision and Development Appeal Board for allowing me to present and speak in this hearing. My name is Andy, and I'm a resident of the 800 block of 6th Street Southwest. I'm speaking on behalf of myself and my partner. He was unable to attend to represent himself. I am a member of the core group of the Neighborhood Rescue High River that is aimed to provide accessible information to High River rights about this application. I am not here to speak on behalf of this group. I can answer questions at the end of this presentation. Next slide. I am supporting the refusal of the development permit application for 605 McLeod Trail Southwest. Next slide. This presentation outlines 5 areas with supporting data for my reason to support the refusal of the application. These are not the only reasons for my support of the refusal, and I support the reasons outlined in the refusal documentation. My goal of this presentation is to provide data-based evidence of my support in the refusal to assist the Subdivision and Development Appeal Board in their decision. Next slide. To clarify, I am not opposed to development that is suitable for the long-term sustainability of High River communities. Development and development appeals need to be aware of strategic foresight and not based in profiteerism or personal prerogative. I believe the refusal of the development is considering High River and the neighborhood's long-term sustainability. This decision should stand until the application collaboratively meets the needs of High River rights and the community rather than prioritizing lucrative gains. Next slide. As mentioned directly 11 times in the refusal document provided by the town, and according to the document, mentioned multiple times the applicant before, during, and after submission, the density of the project is a concern of paramount proportions. The density of the project is an extreme departure from the current scale and density of the neighborhood. Next slide. Using 2021 Statistics Canada Census data for High River, the average persons per dwelling is 2.4. Each dwelling with a 0 to 4 plus designated bedrooms also had collected data by Statistics Canada. Dwellings with 0 bedrooms are dwellings such as flats or bachelor suites. Next slide. With the Statistics Canada Census data in mind, the additional density strain on the area can be estimated at an approximate addition of 45 to 60 persons, or a 1,775% to 1,900% increase from the previous dwelling. This is based on the refused development plans having a single building with 25 units, 44 rooms intended to be bedrooms. with 8 single units and 15 double units and 2 triple units from the plans made available to the public on October 27, 2025. The previous dwelling would have been expected to be 2.4 to 3 persons, and it was 2 persons at the point of property sale, which is an acceptable range for statistical data representation. Next slide. The refusal document also outlines, although not existing for established neighborhoods, the target density per hectare is 20 dwellings. The 0.18 hectare site, with an exact quote from the document, equates to approximately 139 units per hectare, a 595% increase over the proposed density targets. Based on reaching a 20 dwelling density target in the 0.18 hectare property, this would be 3.6 dwellings. Again, while this density is not stated in town documents for established neighborhoods, disregarding density concerns is abhorrent behavior in an attempt to take advantage of small town laws and regulations. Next slide. The concern about the density proposed in the area is the core issue for all my reasons for my support of the refusal. The hub for spokes of a wheel, if you will. While it is being argued that density is not the right legal test, density is directly relevant to neighborhood amenities, public realm impacts, traffic accessibility, landscaping pressure, and other items mentioned in the refusal document. Referencing density is not improper. It explains why various impacts are unacceptable. Next slide. The density proposed has a direct impact on a reduction of landscaped areas. The land use bylaw requires a minimum of 40% landscaping. However, the proposal offers only 24.94, a 15.06% deficiency, which represents a loss of over 3,280 square feet of permeable green space. Line 17 of the memorandum of argument of the appellant states that landscaping would be, quote, subject to a landscaping plan and would be professionally landscaped and maintained, thereby mitigating any undue interference with the amenities of the neighborhood, detraction from the public realm, or material interference with the affected use, enjoyment, or value of the neighboring parcels of land. The location of nearby parks and amenities within walking distance also serves to mitigate the reduction of on-site landscaping, end quote. This is like saying we are near the foothills and mountains, so we don't need parks in town. Not to mention the ableism in this statement, discounting those with mobility issues despite advertising the units as accessible. Showing the points made for accessibility and safety are for marketing and the benefits of it. This is putting future trust in a property owner that did not have a contractor ready for when snow falls and left sidewalks unshoveled for long periods this winter. And as of walking here this morning, has a property with garbage, construction debris, and cabinets sitting around. And in the summer, allowed noxious weeds to run rampant and grass to grow to the point of folding over on itself. This signals when upkeep becomes costly or is not profitable, it will be neglected. As a resident, I have no faith in this point, and as a town, permission cannot be granted on the would-bes with no metrics to quantify claims. Now going back to the 15.0% deficiency. Next slide. Well, 15.06 doesn't feel like a lot. This is what the deficiency looks like. Just over 18 parking stalls. As stated in the refusal document, well-designed landscaping enhances the form, character, identity of a development, provides shade, mitigates the urban heat island effect, and supports natural drainage by reducing impervious surfaces, among other benefits. Also, please note that the property is in a flood zone, and the 800 block of 6th Street Southwest does not have underground rainwater drainage. Natural drainage is important. Next slide. The proposal directly contradicts the town plan and the land use bylaws mandate on tree preservation, which states mature trees should only be removed for essential construction. The definition of what High River deems as essential construction is not defined, but various Canadian sources state these areas as healthcare sector, electricity generation, education, public safety, critical infrastructure, and residential construction, with the caveat any residential construction that has already begun is permitted to continue. Construction has not been approved nor begun. This development seeks to remove nearly all of the 20-plus mature trees and vegetation on site, replacing them with narrow vertical species like columnar aspen and lodgepole pine. These replacements fail to contribute to the town's urban forest canopy goals and do not provide the shade or aesthetic character required to maintain the small town feel, as outlined in Goal 1 of the town plan. Several citizens have also noted that the root system of the foliage deemed to stay would have significant ground disturbance, with a high potential to impact root systems, ultimately killing the trees. Next slide. The proposal also fails to meet the town's sustainability and community health objectives. Despite mandates for drought-tolerant landscaping, 94.96% of the proposed plants are indicated to be low or medium drought tolerance foliage, risking increased municipal water consumption. While the proposal has drought-tolerant plants, they only account for 5.04% of the plants. Next slide. Additionally, the property sits within 250 meters of multiple senior facilities, including the High River and District Seniors Friendship Center and Spitzy Manor. The removal of mature natural features and significant reduction of landscaped areas undermines the town's specific 2029-2030 project to establish seniors' residence amenity zones. While it is not directly tied to personal property, it should stand to further establish the need for landscaped areas in the neighborhood. Approving this development would prioritize high-density hardscaping over the established natural environment and the well-being of the neighborhood's vulnerable residents. It should also be mentioned that those visiting the hospital greatly benefit from the visual interest of birds and other wildlife, not just the seniors mentioned in the project. According to the refusal document, the lack of landscaped areas is because the appellant has indicated that the request is related to parking, which is a major concern, and my next point illustrates this. Next slide, please. Statistics Canada census also collected data on vehicle possession in their 2021 census. It was reported that in High River, there can be an expected 0.78 vehicles per person. Next slide. Referring back to the Statistics Canada census estimates of about 45 to 60 persons, it can be expected that the proposed development would have 35.1 to 46.8 vehicles for residents. The application allots for 16 regular spots and 4 accessible parking spots. This creates a discrepancy of parking of 15.1 to 26.8 parking spots, or 175.5 to 234% deficiency, forcing the remaining residents and their guests, visitors, in-home services, and other folks of the property to park on 6th Street Southwest and surrounding streets. The new evidence submission by the appellant accounts for 7 less at only 14 stalls. Next slide, please. A visualization of this displacement of the proposal with 20 stalls can be seen on screen. The visualization was created with the average car length of 15 feet or 4.57 meters, which is the size of a Chevy Cobalt, Ford Focus, or Toyota Prius, with the red icons representing the overflow of residential vehicles from the unit. It is not accounting for larger vehicles like vans or trucks. It also assumes that parking space is used efficiently in the lot, on the street, and parallel parking by all drivers is flawless, which we know is an idyllic world. Next slide. It is likely to look something like this, spanning both sides of the 800 block of 6th Street Southwest across 5 neighbors to the south. Keep in mind, this representation is not considering neighbors that have vehicles, the likelihood of parking on adjacent streets, nor the parking that folks using the hospital facilities frequently occupy. While there is no High River bylaw or document stating that there is a mandatory allotment of street parking or parking for dwellings, this would be unneighborly in the pursuit of personal profiteerism. Next slide. This massive increase in demand would cause displacement to all streets in the neighborhood, not just the 800 block of 6th Street Southwest, causing a potential impact on access to healthcare and safety to children. It should be noted that there is a cause for concern for acts that replicate the video game Frogger, in the form of jaywalking across the busy street of McLeod Trail. Humans by nature are lazy, and the north section of 6th Street Southwest North intersects with the lot with no quick access crosswalks. This is even more cause for concern based on the new evidence submitted with the entrance directly facing this north section of road. This development would increase the traffic and parking needs on a key corner lot connecting a main road with Spitzy Elementary School and to a main hospital access road for EMS vehicle access, staff parking, STARS and other helicopter access, and general patronage of the High River Hospital. Next slide, please. Now about the hospital. The High River General Hospital supports about 50 long-term care residents, has over 13,000 visits to the ER, almost 15,000 diagnostic imaging exams, more than 1,500 patients, and over 3,000 visits to the Community Cancer Center, according to the High River Health Foundation. Making an engagement of patients, not including the support networks of patients, at about 89.05 persons a day. Access to the hospital is already experiencing significant parking strain, and the proposed development would materially worsen these conditions. Land use decisions must protect access, mobility, and the compatibility of the surrounding uses. Hospital staff, patients, and visitors routinely rely on nearby residential streets due to insufficient on-site parking, leaving little capacity for residents themselves. Next slide, please. Residents on streets such as 6th Street Northwest and 9th Avenue Southwest consistently experience near capacity parking, especially during peak hospital hours. This capacity was confirmed by a 2-week quantitative photo study conducted from July 24th to August 5th, 2025. The study consisted of 4 photos from the same location of 6th Street Southwest and 9th Avenue Southwest, 2 in the morning and 2 in the evening. Adding 25 new residential units with a projected 35 to 47 vehicles would exacerbate congestion, reduce safety and accessibility, and further erode the already delicate balance between residential needs and hospital-driven parking and access demands. Next slide, please. The inadequacy of the planned parking directly conflicts with several commitments outlined in High River's town plan. The town has stated clear goals to remain a healthcare center of excellence, a vibrant, interdependent community accessible to all ages and abilities, and a regional hub for healthcare, agriculture support, and innovative small business. Current parking shortages are already impairing hospital access, particularly for seniors, people with disabilities, and families, making it more difficult for them to reach essential medical services safely and conveniently. Approving a development that introduces substantial new parking demand without proportional accommodation contradicts the town plan's stated goals. Next slide. The town not only serves its own residents, but those from surrounding communities. The town of Okotoks, for example, is experiencing rapid population growth projected to reach 73,000 to 96,000 residents by 2049, far exceeding its current population of roughly 33,000. As Okotoks grows, demand for High River's hospital services is expected to rise, especially because High River General Hospital is often a more accessible option than Calgary's South Health Campus. It also is important to note that High River and Rowland Acres Department near Alderside could expect an additional 16,000 residents in the Foothills region, as stated in a Foothills County Council meeting in March 2025. Without considering High River's growth or other foothills communities, the projected growth of Okotoks and the development near Alderside could reach or exceed 49,000 new residents on top of the current population. Without proactive planning to protect the access to regional health care, the development risks compromising access to health care and the facility's ability to serve the regional population effectively. Next slide, please. It is not acceptable to rely on street parking in the already overcrowded streets around the hospital. Over-reliance on limited parking will impact access to healthcare at the High River Hospital and Annex building. While this is a larger systemic issue that needs to be addressed, using strategic foresight not to contribute to the strain is key. The lack of compassion and consideration for those that use and need the facility, often vulnerable populations, in favor of self-gain is appalling behavior in the proposed development and further exemplified in the reduction to 13 stalls in the new evidence. The density of the project directly relates to these points. Next slide, please. Reaching a point that the proposal has been refused and is now being appealed should show the town that there is an unwillingness to empathize with the town and the neighborhood they are not living in. The appellant attended 3 separate public events where the public and members of council administration were in attendance. one held at the High River Library with 57 attendees, one council meeting with 67 letters and 70 plus people in attendance in relation to this proposal, and one adjourned appeal meeting with 29 in physical attendance and many online. Line 29 from the memorandum of argument of the appellant references the Alberta Municipal Government Act, section 683.1, bracket 2, and is interpreted as they have met the confines of the land use bylaw and have a right to be issued a development permit, which is what the new evidence submission has attempted to do. This negates to mention section 680.2, A.1. The board hearing the appeal must have regard to any statutory plan. The town plan that is being said to be unquantifiable. The new evidence has attempted to just barely meet some of the variances related to the town bylaws, but has cast aside the support and documentation of High River's town plan, which holds just as much weight as the town bylaws. Next slide, please. In summary, this presentation outlines why I support the refusal of the development permit for 605 McLeod Trail Southwest, grounding my position in data, established town policies, and the long-term sustainability of High River and my neighborhood. The proposal represents a drastic and unjustified increase in density, resulting in significant reductions to landscaped areas, the removal of mature trees, unsustainable parking shortages, heightened pressure on already hospital-strained adjacent streets, and substantial decrease in enjoyment of the neighborhood. These impacts collectively threaten community safety, accessibility, and the neighborhood's character, while contradicting the goals outlined in the town plan. Despite multiple opportunities to collaborate and adjust the design, the unwillingness and to meaningfully address these concerns before the rejection and in the new evidence signals a future relationship with the town and the neighborhood that will prioritize personal return over community well-being. In the proposed new evidence application, variances were eliminated. Variance elimination does not eliminate discretion. Specifically, when it comes to the mandatory land use bylaw section 3.4.21A, stating the size, location, design, character, and appearance of any building shall be accepted when it has due regard for the town's statutory plans. This plan does not have respect nor due regard for High River's town plan. Next slide, please. I want to pause before I end. I've presented data and facts, connections to bylaws and plans, but hardly touch on the emotional aspect, human aspect I have felt and seen. Organizations and businesses can't and don't want to quantify the I feels and emotional responses. It has been made clear that the appellant has made claims that these are not quantifiable metrics. They aren't easy to work with metrics, nor are they metrics that can be gathered from behind a desk. That's what community is built on: feelings. Laughing with neighbors, having backyard barbecues, coffee on a cold morning. Being human. Neighborhoods are often called communities for a reason. Every resident is a part of it and shaping it. This community has stood up, spoke up, and advocated for a change in a system that tends to forget them. A system that enhances privilege of those with money, specific races, socioeconomic status, and gender. A system that can make it difficult for minority and vulnerable populations. Look around. Think back to the other council meeting, the adjourned hearing, and the community meetings. Who was in the room? The voices I have been hearing through this process and the stories of the community that have been shared tell a lot about the community. We care about High River. Change will happen, I'm sure we all know that, but if the town's documents and bylaws are cast aside to accommodate significant variances and monumental town plan concerns in favor of private interests, it undermines the integrity of our town's planning process, the sense of community, the sentiment that the town works for the people that live in it. One neighbor has become so distressed by the idea of this potentiality, she is actively disengaging and avoiding our attempts to support her in speaking up. One neighbor has told me she feels hopeless and thought this would be her forever home. I, myself, and my partner have contemplated how to sell a home that we recently bought to escape the densification of places like Calgary, a home and community we have finally felt part of since moving here 10 years ago. The application can be boiled down to two core bylaw references. 3.420A, stating the development would not unduly interfere with the amenities of the neighborhood, detract from public realm, or materially interfere with, or affect the use, enjoyment, or value of neighboring lots, which is supported by the Alberta Municipal Government Act, line 646, with near exact wording. The elements that make High River so special to be part of. The appellant states that this and 3.4.21 have no measurable criteria and should not be considered in the refusal. The engagement on this application is proof that it's quantifiable. The second is the land use bylaw on page 1. 1.1, general purpose, states the purpose of this bylaw is to allow sustainable development based on smart growth principles as they relate to the surrounding and built and unbuilt environment. This line has specific connection to being stewards of sustainable design, stating the town, the community, and development industry act as stewards for High River of tomorrow. All development shall focus on long-term quality over short-term gains. Is this application being a steward for the future of High River to you? Or is it solely rooted on a singular return on investment? Approving this proposal would signal that our established documents are merely suggestions and not promises to High Riverites, that they're easily set aside for individual gain at the expense of the community's long-term vision, that the residents' voices don't matter, that the people in this room don't matter. We must decide today if our written policies actually govern this town or if they subject whoever pushes the hardest for an exception of self-gain. Thank you. I can answer any questions if there's any questions.
Thank you. That was very passionate. I do have a couple questions for you. I appreciate this is sensitive for everybody. You do appreciate that it is a permitted use.
The application itself?
The application's a permitted use, right?
Yeah, the application itself is permitted, but it does not have due regard to statutory plans, which is outlined in many aspects throughout the land use bylaw.
Absolutely. And there is a hierarchy of requirements, legislations that need to be read in alignment with the bylaw. So the Municipal Government Act is essentially the hierarchy of that requirement.
Yes, in the Municipal Government Act, I also saw it has to have due regard to statutory plans.
Absolutely,
So.
absolutely. Just to bring notice to that. Your comment, you said it is not satisfying the needs of High River. If you had your opportunity to do whatever you wanted with that, what would you put there?
I don't think that's a fair question to ask of me, as I'm not a developer or in that position to make a comment about that.
As a neighbor, what would you like to see there?
Not what is being proposed. I think it is far too dense and does not suit the needs of that neighborhood, specifically with the High River Hospital being right there.
Okay. The last question I have is about the parking. Is there an opportunity that this development might actually serve as a suitable location for people that attend the hospital on a regular basis?
I think that's speculation of who the property would be rented to, and I don't think that's a fair assumption because we can't operate on would-be's, should-be's, or could-be's.
Absolutely. I'm just wondering if it's a consideration, given that it has an elevator, it's accessible, smaller unit variations is what's being proposed. So I'm wondering if that was a consideration.
I don't believe so, because based on my knowledge, the other apartment buildings in the area were initially meant to only serve the hospital and now are no longer serving that purpose. So I don't believe that that is a long-term or acceptable strategy for this.
That's fair. Thank you. Well done.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, my name is Dave Dobson, and for the record, I live at 801 7th Street Southwest, so I'm approximately 1 block away from the building. Let me start. I have a couple of things that we've already talked about, so I won't belabor that. But just to say that I'm disappointed with an attempt to stifle comment from the audience. It would be pretty easy for any of us to believe we're affected. We live in this town. We've lived in this town for years. We've helped to make this town what it is. And so I'm hoping that anyone who wants to speak will have an opportunity. Specifically, I'm here on behalf of an organization that Andy already mentioned. It's called Neighborhood Rescue. And we have been endeavoring since the outset to keep people informed of what's going on with the particular property through our time frame from June on. The meeting that you heard about at the library was one that we convened at the beginning to try to get information to the public. Neighborhood Rescue is here to ask you to dismiss the appeal and to uphold the refusal. Frankly, to address three things rather than belaboring a point. Since the outset, we have asked for three things as Neighborhood Rescue. We've asked for a building which was not as tall as that proposed. We've asked for a building with a footprint smaller than that which was proposed. And we've asked for a building which had a more street-oriented presence. In other words, looked better from the street as you go by. We could comment back about the amount of landscaping and say that ties directly back to the density of the building, the amount of the area used for building and for parking. We could talk in more detail about the number of stories of the building. We've been told that the building has 3 stories. And I submit to you, and the Development Authority has pointed out, that the only difference between 4 stories and 3 stories in this context is 5 inches. 5 inches of the lowest level of the building is the difference between that which is in the ground and that which is above the ground. And if we are looking for measurable things to talk about, imagine the bylaw which says 3 stories, and imagine for a moment that this building actually was 5 inches different. And it would have 4 stories, and therefore would be against the bylaw in a measurable way. Let me point out that many of us have talked about how this building fits into the town plan, that we ensure the form and character of new development respect and complement. And I submit to you, if you go around High River and look at the other developments in the traditional neighborhood zone, you will find the semi-detached house, which Andy mentioned on 6th Street. You'll find a proposal for a new development on 8th Street between McLeod and the river, which is going to bring down an old building and replace it with a single detached unit. If you go to the large property at 12th Avenue between 8th and 9th, you can see that there will be 6 units in there, of which one of them is already under construction, and it can be seen online. So if we're talking about the character of the neighborhood, it's easy to see how things unfold in a neighborhood. So before I finished, and again ask you to dismiss this appeal, I'd like to say one more time, we asked for a building which wasn't as tall. We asked for a building which didn't have as big a footprint. And we asked for a building with better street presence. And we got none of those things. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave.
Sorry, I do have a question.
Sorry, Dave.
That's okay. At any point, did the appellant come to your gatherings or your committee, if you will, to have any community engagement to understand what you were asking for?
Yeah, at the June meeting, we invited the appellant to attend, and initially the answer was yes, and then the answer became no, and then on the night of the meeting, the answer became yes again. And so we anticipated, we the organizers of that meeting at the library, we anticipated that the appellant would come with material which could be shared. We had an overhead available. We actually bought technology that we could use to make sure that we could access the screens at the library. And to be truthful, the appellant did appear. And he did attempt to answer questions from those of us in the audience. While at the same time, as moderator for that session, I attempted to keep us talking about architecture as opposed to business. Now, I have to say that that is the only occasion where we've had a direct engagement with the appellant. The appellant has not sought out, nor, I must admit, have we sought out direct engagement. But it is widely, I believe, available that we have a distribution list that we send to 50+ individuals, so it wouldn't be too hard to reach out. We have a website we've had since the beginning. I hope that answers your question.
Just to confirm, you said you have 50 members?
We do. We have a distribution list in excess of 50 people.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Dave. I think that's all for now.
Thank you. My name is Mary Ellen McCall. I live directly across the street from the proposed development at 530. I live at 530 McLeod Trail Southwest. The first thing I want to say is that I want to endorse everything that has been said by the two speakers ahead of me, and I will not repeat any of that. I strongly support the denial of a development permit on the property at 605 McLeod Trail Southwest. As a family physician who has practiced for 50 years, I know the importance of housing and community as social determinants of health. Many people in High River, particularly in the Southwest, have lived there for decades. We have been through the flood of 2013, and we have invested vast amounts of money and effort in reclaiming our devastated homes and properties. This shows a strong commitment to community. On the other hand, the proposal we have before us consists of renters. Renters tend to be transient and therefore not contribute to commitment or stability. I acknowledge we need more new housing, but in the recent construction of the duplex south of the 605 lot, we can see an acceptable and pleasant solution. In contrast, the massive size of the design of 605 McLeod shows an insensitivity to the ambience of our neighborhood, and it has sparked a response of toxic anxiety. And I will tell you, my biggest anxiety is the devaluation of my property because of this development.
Thank you very much, Mary.
button? It's already pressed. Okay. That's a bit too close. I really wish to thank Dave and Andy, and
Make sure you're speaking clearly into the mic so everybody can hear you, please.
I wish to thank Dave, Andy, and Mary Ellen for their words, and also the board for providing an opportunity to be heard. I'm Cheryl Layton. My residence at 817 6th Street Southwest is directly to the south of the property in question, with a narrow laneway dividing the two. I firmly support the Development Authority's decision to refuse issuance of a development permit for the reasons outlined in its notice of decision. The appellant states that the Development Authority failed to apply the proper variance tests, and that the variances involved in the development would have met the tests of both the Land Use Bylaw and the Municipal Government Act. Under Section 4.1.4 of the Land Use Bylaw, the Development Authority may allow a variance where the development would not unduly interfere with or affect the use, enjoyment, or value of the neighboring parcels of land. In its decision, the Development Authority concluded that the proposal does not satisfy this standard and therefore cannot be supported in its current form. I therefore fully concur with the Development Authority's conclusion and submit the following comments and observations in support of it from my next door perspective. I wish to refer to Section 6873DI of the Municipal Government Act, whereby it reads that the proposed development would not materially interfere with or affect the use, enjoyment, or value of neighboring parcels of land. I submit that my right as the property owner to the use and enjoyment of my property would be compromised by the substantial and unreasonable interference resulting from loss of amenity due to the proposed development. Specifically, the loss consists in an increased noise level associated with the activity of the tenants of 8 one-bedroom apartments and 17 2- or 3-bedroom apartment units, as well as increased noise level and pollution generated by more motor vehicle circulation and idling, and the interference associated with the servicing and operation of the property, such as collection of solid waste and recycling, snow removal, property maintenance, and possibly air conditioning, as a result of the appellant's rigid targeted return on investment. Collection of solid waste and recycling along the laneway would apparently be done bi-weekly using a Moloch collection truck equipped with a crane. As soon as I learned about the crane, I thought, oh no, there goes my power line or my internet service line again. But okay, so we have a crane, we have a truck in the laneway, the narrow laneway, which is one way. Presumably the operation would result in blocking the laneway for an unknown duration and with an unknown noise level for an unknown duration. In addition, along this laneway, the proposed development has one of its 2 main access points plus 4 barrier-free parking stalls right across from the north side of my house. These 4 parking stalls are accessed directly from the laneway. Add to this the vehicles of other residents who regularly use it. From a safety standpoint and from a realistic standpoint, I submit that the L-shaped, narrow, one-way laneway is not designed for such a high-use scenario. And I'm specifically thinking of further down, like it's a J-shaped or an L-shaped laneway, and most homes have garages, which are backyard garages, so they usually have a parking pad to back into, sort of vis-a-vis their garage, whereas the 4 barrier-free parking stalls would have a pretty tight, anyway, I guess if it's architecturally approved, it must work. And I'd then like to carry on with respect to how the same section it says that the proposed development will not materially interfere with the value of neighboring parcels of land. And having read some appeals from other municipalities, it seems that value is often disregarded because it's too volatile, it's too hard to pinpoint, but I've like to propose value as desirability, and that it can, and there is a certain way of measuring it. If I provide you with a hypothetical comparison or a scenario where there's a prospective home buyers looking for a single-family dwelling in Southwest High River. There are two comparable properties with similar assessment, form, siding, lot, and price, which are being compared, or considered rather, for purchase. We have property A, which has a single-family dwelling on both sides. Property B has a single-family dwelling on one side and a 25-unit, three-story apartment building on the other side. I submit that the obvious choice would most assuredly be property A, and that property B's value or desirability is negatively impacted by the neighboring 25-unit, three-story apartment building. This argument supports the Development Authority's conclusion that the appellant's proposal does not satisfy the standard, which includes not materially interfere with or affect the use, enjoyment, or value of the neighboring parcels of land, which is the first paragraph of page 7 of the Notice of Decision. And lastly, I'd like to address building mass. I know a lot has been said about it, but just to reinforce that the proposed building would be approximately 56 and a half feet high, and the annex, which seems to be used as a comparison, has an estimated height based on a combined laser measurement and proportional calculation to be 30 feet high. In other words, the proposed building would be almost twice as high as the annex. I firmly support the Development Authority's decision based on its concerns regarding, among other things, overall compliance with the land use bylaw, specifically section 3.4.21, design, character, and appearance of buildings. In closing, and on an even more personal note, everyone knows that communities evolve and that development is part and parcel of the process. The 2024 Town Plan recognizes that High River's residential neighborhoods have been thoughtfully developed. For myself, the past several months have made me realize that both for residents and for developers, quality of sleep is a litmus test for thoughtful development, and I respectfully say that I feel that this proposal has failed that test. Thank you very much. If you have any questions.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Jennifer Savignon. I live at 819 6th Street Southwest in High River. Based on the scale, density, and massing of the development project, I am asking the board to consider me as an affected party. I just want to say that I support the refusal of the development permit at 605 McLeod Trail Southwest by the Development Authority. I agree with all the arguments that were presented to you today by the Development Authority and by the rest of the affected parties. And I share the same concerns about this development project. I would like to ask the members of the board to uphold the decision that was made by the Development Authority on November 21st, 2025. I strongly believe that it was the right decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other affected members that wish to speak at this time? Thank you all very much for your submissions. All right, I think we're going to move into the rebuttal opportunity. So before we move into the closing remarks, each party will now have an opportunity to provide a brief rebuttal. Rebuttals must be limited to responding to new information raised during the presentations. This is not an opportunity to introduce entirely new evidence or restate earlier points. I'll first invite the Development Authority to provide any rebuttal they wish to make in response to information presented by the appellant or affected parties.
Thank you very much. We would like to begin the rebuttal section by first sincerely thanking all residents who are here today. We know that you've taken time out of your busy schedules to participate in this important public process, and your involvements are incredibly important to the governance of our community. Moving forward with that, introduction of new evidence. The town fully recognizes that the appellant is permitted to bring forward any new evidence as part of this process, including the alternative design. This is allowed under the MGA, and the board is given the same discretionary powers as the Development Authority to review any new material. Because of that, the board is required to undertake a full review of the revised drawings, just as the Development Authority would have done had these plans been submitted during our formal review process. Then we would like to discuss compliance with the land use bylaw, and then next we'll be talking about section 3.4.21 of the land use bylaw. The town acknowledges that the revised design appears to satisfy some of the land use bylaw sections for which the Development Authority had previously requested variances. The town would like to review the landscaping plan specifically with the appellant in more detail. The landscaped area is the area in which landscaping is primarily located, and it does appear on this design, albeit we did not receive full high-definition designs, and we typically would get full 24 by 36 printout copies of it. But based on this, it does appear that some items may have been included in the landscape area calculation to reach the 40% requirement, such as the concrete ramp and sidewalks that the town would not consider to be landscaped area. The town also does have concerns about stormwater management on the site that have not been addressed, and not meeting the required 40% landscaping would further compound this issue. Finally, even with the revisions, the overall massing of the building still, in the Development Authority's opinion, remains inconsistent with the established character of the neighborhood. This is a key consideration under the bylaw, and it is an issue that the revised drawings, in our view, has not met. That brings us to the next point, section 3.4.21 of the land use bylaw. We would now like to speak to this section because it has been a central point in the appellant's arguments. In item 24 of the appellant's memo, it states in part, conformance with the section 3.4.21 of the TND, that's Traditional Neighborhood District, is not applicable because it is not a development standard. It is a rule intended to guide the discretion of the Development Authority when reviewing discretionary use development permit applications. Notably, the TND land use district is clearly organized in terms of which rules are described as a standard or have clearly measurable standards. The town does not agree with this interpretation. The land use bylaw itself does not distinguish between sections 3.4.3 through 3.4.20 and section 3.4.21 in any way that limits the applicability of section 3.4.21. In fact, section 3.4.20b makes it very clear that any section in the bylaw may be applied at the discretion of the Development Authority to ensure high-quality design. That includes section 3.4.21. It's also important to highlight that section 3.4.21 is written as a mandatory requirement. It uses the word shall and the bylaw defines shall as required. That means that that section is not optional. Section 3.4.21 requires that the Development Authority consider several factors, including statutory plan policies, character of existing development, building mass, materials, and architectural detailing, and effects on adjacent parcels and districts. These are fundamental planning considerations. This section gives the Development Authority broad discretion to ensure that new development is compatible with its surroundings and that the neighborhood character is protected. Under Section 6421 of the Municipal Government Act, the development permit must be issued by the Development Authority only when an application conforms with the land use bylaw. Similarly, under Section 687(1)A, in determining an appeal, the board must comply with the applicable land use policies, statutory plans, and any land use bylaw in effect. It follows, if a proposal does not meet Section 3.4.21, then it does not conform with the land use bylaw. And in that situation, the Development Authority is not required to approve the application. In this case, the proposal does not satisfy Section 3.4.21, and therefore the Development Authority acted appropriately in refusing the permit. The town submits that the proposal's non-compliance with Section 3.4.21 supports that the development will interfere with the amenities of the neighborhood and the use and enjoyment of neighboring properties, such as the MGA's exemption criteria, Section 687D, are not met. Therefore, in pursuant to the MGA, the DA was unable to issue the development permit. Next, we will be commenting on the overall design of the proposed development, both the original and alternative versions. The Development Authority has had major concerns with the original design, particularly scale and massing. These elements, along with multiple variances required to support them, would, in the Development Authority's view, disrupt the character of the neighborhood, the public realm, and fail to meet the town plan's expectation that new development respects the town of High River's small town feel. The Development Authority was also concerned that the variances were driven by the building's size and not by any real site constraints, as we do consider it to be a greenfield site now that it is vacant. Even with the alternative design submitted last Friday and reviewed today, the town continues to have significant concerns with this proposal. The massing and scale remain essentially unchanged, and they continue to be out of character with the surrounding development. That incompatibility is the core issue that we believe the revisions have not addressed. We also remain concerned about the potential impact on neighboring residents. The Municipal Government Act requires us to consider whether a development interferes with the use and enjoyment of neighboring properties. In our view, both the original and the revised designs raise a concern. The town's position is that the proposal does interfere and therefore should not be approved, regardless of whether the variances have been satisfied or not. We understand that the appellant has expressed concerns about the pre-application process, and we appreciate that they were seeking clarity early on. However, it's important to note that the town cannot pre-review or pre-approve development concepts without formal submission. We need the complete application and all technical reports and detailed plans in order to properly review the proposal. The town has completed a basic review of the proposed alternative design for this site. I do want to emphasize the word basic because the materials provided are not engineering drawings. Without the full engineering submissions, the town simply cannot complete a full technical review that is always required with developments on this scale. This is particularly significant when we look into issues such as stormwater management. In the Southwest, we are dealing with older infrastructure, and it is absolutely critical that any new development can demonstrate that it will not exceed existing release rates on the site. At this point, the town has not received the confirmation either for the original design or for the revised design that the stormwater management performance can be met. Without that confirmation, we cannot responsibly assess the potential impacts on the overall system. Approving development without this information would not be in the best interest of the public. It would mean moving forward without understanding whether the infrastructure can safely support the proposal. We would also like to highlight parking because it is another practical aspect of the revised design that does raise concerns. The original proposal included 16 standard parking stalls and 4 handicap stalls for 25 units. The revised design now provides only 11 standard stalls and 2 handicap stalls for the same number of units. While the land use bylaw does not set minimum on-site parking requirements, the town still has a responsibility to consider whether the parking provided is functional and appropriate for the intensity of the development being proposed. In summary, the town's position is grounded in both legislation and planning principles that guide responsible development here in the town of High River. The town acted within its authority following the requirements of the Land Use Bylaw and the Municipal Government Act, and exercised appropriate discretion throughout the review of the application. While the appellant has introduced a new alternative design, at this stage, the revised drawings do not resolve the core issues that led to the original refusal. Significant concerns remain, partially around stormwater management, where we still do not have confirmation that the development can meet the required performance standards. This is especially critical, as I said, in the Southwest, where older infrastructure demands careful control of release rates. Beyond this engineering concern, the revised design continues to present issues related to massing and neighborhood compatibility. These are central considerations under Section 3.4.21 of the Land Use Bylaw, which requires the Development Authority to assess character, scale, and effect on adjacent properties. The proposal does not satisfy these requirements. Under the MGA, the Development Authority may only approve a non-compliant development if it is satisfied that the project will not interfere with the neighborhood amenities or with the use, enjoyment, or value of the nearby properties. It's the Development Authority's view that this development does interfere in those ways. Upholding the refusal decision is in the best interest of the community and is consistent with the town's responsibility to protect neighborhood character, public safety, and long-term infrastructure performance. That concludes the DA's rebuttal comments.
Thank you. Thank you, DA. Now, before we give the floor for the rebuttal to the appellant, we did have a couple questions concerning the development and the proposal. The first one that we had was, do we know if the garbage disposal system services High River? That Moloch system, it does? Oh, to the DA? Oh, I'm sorry, okay. Okay, sorry about that, sorry. I might have failed in the procedure here. I think I actually should ask that to the DA and then we can rebuttal against that. Sorry about that. Right. And then, yeah, so I've got a question for you guys, yeah. Was there ever a traffic study or a parking study done or requested?
I recall that our engineering division stated that we don't typically request them, the rest of the TIAs, if there are not more than 100 trips per hour in peak times projected because of the development.
Thank you.
So then there was no concern at any time about parking for any multiple unit development coming through?
Thank you. So, well, definitely concerns over parking. As Sarah has mentioned, the land use bylaw does not give a standard for that. The concern comes with the intensity of the use. And so while there was concerns, it's not something that's directly controlled.
Okay, so there was no requirement in the bylaw.
That's correct. There's no requirement in the bylaw.
Thank you. Thanks, Riley.
If there were 100, and sorry, thank you, Chair. If there were, in the event there was 100 trips per hour, what would you apply? What would be your parking ratio that you would apply?
That's not specific for parking. That is for what we call a
Trips.
traffic assessment. TIA. Traffic assessment study.
Yeah.
And so that would look at a lot more than parking. It's more about flows, access, sizing of roads, those kind of things.
Sorry, I don't think I was clear with my question. In the event, multifamily projects generally see a ratio given the number of bedrooms. Your bylaw does not outline that specifically. Is there a ratio that you would generally apply to a multifamily building?
For parking, it was an intentional decision on the part of the town of High River planning division, as well as the council, as we were creating this bylaw. The bylaw came into effect in 2017. It was very new and different at the time. As I think I mentioned in my presentation, it's based on form-based code. And one of the key principles in creating a form-based code land use bylaw is it's very focused on design. And part of that, and part of the philosophy that we really heard from council and from the public as well, is that there was a problem with the way the town was dealing with parking before. I've heard the mayor talk a few times about Carlson's right across the street from us, and they wanted to do something different, and they would have required like 23 off-site parking spots, and that just didn't make any sense. So we made the conscious decision to avoid having mandatory minimum parking requirements based on the assumption that developers know how much parking they require, and they're not going to create a development that's not going to be marketable to their demographic.
Thank you.
Thank you for that, Sarah. Are there any parts of the land use bylaw that are being reviewed at this time?
Council has greenlit a full land use bylaw review. It went to a recent council, and we are actually having our formal kickoff meeting in February of this year, and the project is expected to go between February and conclude in November of this year. So yes, that is a very significant project upcoming for the town.
Thank you. Can you also confirm for me that the primary street for this particular parcel is McLeod Trail?
That is correct, McLeod Trail.
You also talked in your presentation about pedestrian access. I did not see any change in either plan to any of the sidewalk configuration there.
Yes, I think I was more talking about wanting to reduce the potential fragmentation of the pedestrian network. So I believe, let me just look here. Yes, in the new design, they have no access going over McLeod Trail or like either of the roads. So that means that if you're walking on McLeod Trail or you're walking on 6th Street, you're not going to be contending with cars coming and going. Everything is going out the laneway.
We also mentioned the infrastructure. Is the civil design not required as part of the full building permit application?
Yeah, and we had an yes, we did have an engineering design before, and our engineering division did a fulsome review of the original project. We were simply saying that because there are some significant changes, we're not able to benefit from that full engineering review because we haven't received it yet. I also did touch upon the stormwater management calculations. That was something that we still have not received from the applicant.
Understood. Thank you. Let me just quickly check my notes.
Sarah, can I just confirm that you said that not all of the variances were abated with this new design?
Correct. I did mention that the Development Authority would like to discuss the landscaped area part with the applicant. Again, the Development Authority did not receive what we usually would. We would usually receive full 24 by 36 size drawings, very easy to read. Just from this, it appears to me that there are some areas like the concrete ramp and internal concrete sidewalks that may be being added to the 40%, and those are items that the town would not consider to be landscaped area. That is the concern.
So are there any other variants then that you feel are outstanding and can't be resolved unless you have a full set of drawings?
No, it's that, and of course we are concerned about the design character and appearance of the building section. But yes, we are still concerned about the landscaping, not concerned about the other variances that were in the original 5 variances that we were discussing earlier today.
Thank you.
Yeah, I had nothing further. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. We will now move to I'll invite the appellant or the representative to provide a rebuttal limited to issues raised by the Development Authority or affected parties, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Let me begin by saying I have some sympathy, although not a lot, for the Development Authority's role in these appeals because they are the decision maker of first instance.
I need you to speak up just a little bit, please.
Oh, I'm sorry. Should I start again? Is that better?
Probably better.
Okay. I'm going to preface my comments just with a general remark, but it has some bearing. The Development Authority, as I said, I have some sympathy for their role in these hearings, but not a lot of sympathy, because they are the decision maker in the first instance, and yet their role in these hearings typically, and this hearing's no different from any other that I've been in, their role is to present the application and go through in this case, the variances and the application of the land use bylaw and any applicable statutory plans and policies. Where it gets difficult is where they move into advocacy, because that is not their role. Their role is to present for the benefit of the board and the participants in this appeal the application and how it was adjudged against the land use bylaw and applicable plans and policies. So, prefacing my remarks with that, The Development Authority did raise concerns about not having a fulsome review of the alternative plan, as we've called it, the no variance plan. Our full intention, and as the process is and should be, if the board approves the alternative plan, and I realize the board doesn't have its own planning department, but it is customary in other at other appeal boards that I've been at, that the board would approve subject to a review by the Development Authority. So you don't give up your decision-making powers, but you utilize the available expertise at the town, in this case, to require and review a full set of plans. And those plans would at some point, and I'm not sure of the town's processes, but this development, like any other, call it larger development, would typically have to, these are often referred to as development site servicing plans, and they're a condition of approval of the development permit that one of those plans be submitted, engineering plans that address issues like stormwater management, and is there enough capacity in the utility system that served the site. So that's just standard fare, and we're not looking to bypass any of that, either with the original plans, which we've asked the board to approve the variances for, or with the alternative plan. That's just part of the process, and as I said, the process is typically that the board would rely on the Development Authority to review the plans, because that's what they do on a daily basis. But ultimately, and if there's an issue with those plans, then your ultimate decision may change. So your decision, if you were to approve either the original or the alternative plan, would be subject to, sorry, not so much on the original plans because you're granting the variances. It's been all through the vetting process by the Development Authority. But if you were to approve the alternative plans, it would be subject to a satisfactory review of that the variances are as stated. There aren't any. And but it's not subject, as I've argued, to any broader discretion. It is not, the Development Authority does not, notwithstanding, and I'll address this in a moment, notwithstanding what the Development Authority just said, the Development Authority does not have general planning discretion for a permitted use application. Now, there was reference made in support of the argument that they do, that Section 3.4.21 does use the imperative shall rather than may, but I don't take issue with that shall. What I took issue with was the Development Authority applying that general planning discretion to any building or structure. That's not the law with respect to permitted uses, and I went through the law thoroughly, I thought, but I'm happy to answer any questions about it. So it applies, that general planning discretion applies to discretionary uses, and so that shall clearly applies if they are reviewing a discretionary use. That entire section of the Land Use Bylaw 3.4.21 is general planning discretion, character, appearance, subjective issues that are not properly applied to a permitted use application. Now, I want to make, I think the point was raised both by the Development Authority and by some of the affected persons that spoke. The variance test is not a test that's applied to the proposed development generally. It's applied to each requested proposed variance. So on its own, I heard several times in the presentations that the proposed development would not meet the test under 687-3D. It's not the development as a whole, it's each individual variance to which that test applies. Now, one of the affected persons, and I'm sorry if I can't recall which one it was in particular, did mention that the statutory plans that the board, they referenced the section in the MGA that's 680 sub 2 sub 8.1, where it says, in determining an appeal, the board hearing the appeal must have regard to any statutory plan. So trying to make the argument to bring in the consideration of the town plan and the discretionary planning prescriptions or suggestions that are in there. Having regard to it would only apply if legally you were required to have regard to it. Permitted use application, if it meets the development standards, as I went through, the development authority or the board in this instance is required to issue an appeal. So the statutory plan consideration, for better or worse, is not something you have to have regard to. And I just want to close, if I may, and I did read this quote earlier, and this was from the Court of Appeal decision in Krumka, which references with approval the words of Professor Laux, who wrote Planning Law and Practice in Alberta. And I just want to read this again because I think it goes to the crux of what we're arguing. It says, the philosophy behind the distinction between permitted and discretionary uses is simply that. Where uses are shown as permitted within a particular district, they are regarded to be of that type as are clearly compatible with another and therefore unlikely to adversely affect neighboring properties in the same district. Now, it's unfortunate, perhaps, that the bylaw, that this is a permitted use under the traditional neighborhood district, but the bylaw is what it is. I would suggest that if the affected persons, and that's a broader group here, I understand, and there's a lot of opposition to it, but your arguments, unfortunately, they don't land with this particular development permit application. We heard that the town is going through a land use bylaw revision, and I would suggest that that would be the appropriate forum to address what the development authority, perhaps, and the affected persons might consider to be something missing in the land use bylaw that would consider something like this a permitted use. And when I say something like this, we think this development is thoroughly defensible. It meets the development standards, subject in the original plan to some variances that make planning sense and meet that test. But you have to take the land use bylaw as it reads, and it does allow this to be a permitted use. And with permitted uses come the interpretation through the Court of Appeal that says if they're permitted uses, that the implication is that council must have considered that use something that's clearly compatible, to use the words that I quoted earlier, with one another and therefore unlikely to adversely affect neighboring properties. You know, we're hearing a lot of opposition, but that's the law with permitted use applications. Thank you.
Thank you. So now, if any affected parties wish to offer a brief rebuttal to information raised by the appellant or development authority, please indicate now.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, you all know who I am at this point. My background and my business is advocacy. I'm here to advocate on behalf of the affected neighbors, people who live beside this property, and people for whom the appreciation and the desirability of their property is particularly personal. People who would like to continue that enjoyment even though a new development is built nearby. So I submit to you, going forward, one of the ways that we could handle this, the appeal board could dismiss the appeal. The appellant, with new plans in hand, could now submit those plans to the Development Authority for review as if they were a new set of plans. The risk, of course, is that we'll be here some months down the road, again dealing with this, but as an advocacy point of view, it seems to me, rather than respectfully pushing this down people's throats, we could actually find a way to dismiss the appeal, deliver the plans to the Development Authority, and make a decision based on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. This concludes the rebuttal portion of the hearing. Oh, sorry, I misspoke. Renee has a question.
Sorry, I'm just the question person. But for the appellant, I do have a couple questions, and I wanted to give you the opportunity, because I did ask the members of the public the same question about community engagement, and I just wanted to give you the opportunity to comment to that.
So I was reached out to on Facebook shortly after this kind of blew up in June, after we had this meeting with the DA, just regarding community feedback and council's feedback. So I believe it was Andy that reached out, or Sunday reached out to me on Facebook, just a member of the community, and said that, you know, there's a meeting and I think it would make sense for you to be there. You know, initially I didn't know if that'd be productive, just because there was, like, I was getting berated with messages on Facebook, and I made a post on a page just kind of defending the development and defending kind of, hey, how we got here. Just took possession of this property and certainly wasn't anticipating this sort of feedback. And also at that time we had a list of prospective tenants. Like, it seemed like High River needs an accessible and affordable development like this. So that was a bit of a surprise. So they had a meeting at the library. No one communicated to me that I was supposed to bring a presentation, but I thought I should show up. And I showed up, and I think it was about 45 minutes, and just answered questions. And that was kind of the only direct communication with the public that I've had since. I attended a couple council meetings as well, just because I knew my development was being brought up. So that's all.
No, I appreciate that. My only other question about the design, and specifically the revised design, is, as a developer, do you think that 13 parking stalls for 25 units is adequate?
We would prefer more parking stalls, which is why the initial design was designed the way it was.
Nothing further. Thank you, Jordan. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, everybody. We will now proceed to brief closing remarks. First, the Development Authority, please make any closing remarks you have.
Thank you, members of the board. I would like to conclude by bringing together the key points that guide the town's position in this appeal. The land use bylaw is an implementation tool of the town plan. It is used as a tool to ensure that development aligns with the long-term vision for our community, which includes protecting neighborhood character, ensuring safety, and managing growth responsibly. The Development Authority applied the land use bylaw, including section 3.4.21, as required, and we do have legal counsel here if there are any further questions on that matter. Even with the revised design submitted at the appeal stage, the core issue still remains unresolved. One is stormwater management does continue to be a concern. That area of town does have older infrastructure, and we must be extremely careful that any new development can manage the stormwater without exceeding the existing rate. Also, parking does remain a practical concern. The alternative design includes 11 standard parking stalls and 2 handicap stalls for 25 units, while the land use bylaw does not require a specific amount or really any on-site parking. The limited surface parking on a relatively small site does raise reasonable questions about day-to-day functionality and whether 25 units is an appropriate fit for the size of property. In addition, the massing of the building continues to be inconsistent with the character of the neighborhood. And we do go back to section 3.4.21 of the land use bylaw. We do again have our legal counsel if there are any questions, but we are still in the view that that section requires the development authority to consider massing, architectural detailing, and the effect on adjacent parcels. The proposal, in our view, does not satisfy those requirements. For these reasons, the Development Authority believes that its refusal remains appropriate. Upholding that decision, we believe, is in the best interest of the community and consistent with the town's responsibility to ensure safe, compatible, and well-planned development. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now the appellant may make your closing remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. I don't have many. I want to thank you for your attentiveness and the participants today for their attentiveness and for participating in what is a useful process. It's our right to appeal, and it's the affected person's right to speak to that appeal. So I don't wish to deny anyone's right to fully express their opinions on that. I do want to point out, though, that I did, in filing the notice of appeal, and I'm looking at it here, point number 3, I did say, and this was a while ago, so this was December 10th, I believe. No? Anyways, within the appeal period, 21 days from the notice of decision. I did, in that notice of appeal, say that the Development Authority misapplied section 3.4.21 of the land use bylaw, which gives the DA broad planning discretion to a permitted use application. I did not see any argument to the contrary that addressed the legal points that I made, and I would suggest it's a bit late in the game for the Development Authority to say that they've brought legal counsel and is prepared to address those in closing remarks. Thank you.
Thank you. So I think now we're going to move to a closed meeting and do our deliberations. But first, I want to thank everybody so much for their time and your commitment to making the date here today. I just want to say I appreciate everybody just with the willingness to come and be a part of this and be a part of the community. Thank you very much for your time. We're going to go to a closed meeting now and deliberate, and we will have our decision within 2 weeks, I believe is what we have to have. 2 weeks? Yes. So thank you very much, everybody. I hope you have a great rest of your day. You know, I'm going to close the meeting so we don't adjourn. Oh, yeah. So we are adjourning today because we're not going to be reconvening today. So we are closing this meeting today. So motion to adjourn? Motion accepted. Motion. Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful night.